Okay. Welcome to the October 15th, 2019 Board of Commissioner meetings. Please silence your cell phones, pagers, and other electronic communication devices. Agendas are located at the back of the chambers. We do have speaker request forms. They are located at the back of the chambers. If you'd like to fill one out because you'd like to speak on any item today, please hand those to Ms. Holly Hennies to the left of the dais here. They just have what number you want to speak on, what your name is, and the organization as well. So please fill those out if you like to speak today. Next, we'll have a moment of silent reflection and Pledge of Allegiance led by Commissioner Ross Connect.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next, we'll have a review and approval of the agenda, please.
Move approval.
Moved by Drews,
Second.
second by DeSanto. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next is the consent agenda with Ms. Holly Hennies, please.
Good morning, Commissioners. For public notice, the Board of Commissioners uses a consent agenda to act on non-controversial and routine items. The consent agenda is acted upon by one motion and vote of the board. Items may be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda at the request of a board member or a citizen. Today's consent agenda contains the following items. Approval of the minutes from the regular meeting of October 1st, 2019. Number 6 is to reappoint Mr. James Fields as County Constable for Legislative District Number 34. Number 7 is approval of the fourth quarter 2019 state and local agreement with the state of South Dakota submitted by Emergency Management. Number 8 is to declare surplus capital asset number 06236, which is a premium controller module for the purpose of auction or resale or disposal submitted by Emergency Management. Number 9 is to approve the chair's signature on the resolution for Firefighter Appreciation Day. Number 10 is to recognize and thank the volunteers for the month of September 2019 for Human Resources and the Fire Administration. And number 11 is approval to apply for a John T. Vikurovich Foundation grant as submitted by Health and Human Services.
Thank you, Ms. Holly. Is there anyone from the public who wish to remove any items consent agenda 5 through 11? Commissioners, is there any commissioner who would like to remove any items 5 through 11? If not, can we have a motion, please?
Madam Chair, I'd make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Moved by Commissioner Drews.
Second.
Second by Commissioner LaCroix. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next, we're on to regular agenda items. Item number 12, National Council of Behavioral Health Continuum of Care Report. Barry, if you could introduce your guest today, please.
Sure. While Joan's getting it set up, I will make a few comments. I'm Barry Tice, the Director of Pennington County Health and Human Services, and I wanted to thank the Pennington County Board of Commissioners for providing the authorization to pursue this grant through the Helmsley Foundation and work with the National Council for Behavioral Health on this comprehensive study of mental health services in South Dakota. I wanted to thank a few people who are here today, including representatives from the Leona M. and Harry B. Helmsley Charitable Trust, including Elizabeth Gruen, Program Officer, and Jennifer Dixon, Grants Manager, who are seated to my right in the front row. Without their support, this comprehensive study would not have happened and is greatly appreciated not only for Western South Dakota, but the entire state. I wanted to thank the 80 individuals from our community and other communities in Western South Dakota, as well as from across the state, for taking the time to meet with our consultants and help outline the vision for mental health services in Western South Dakota. Lastly, I want to thank our consultants, Joan King, Jim Castleberry, and Jeff Capobianco. I should know that by now. who are here today to provide an executive summary of their findings and answer any questions you might have. So I'm going to turn it over to Joan, Jeff, and Jim for their comments.
The three J's.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for having us. Jeff and I, well, Jim knows Rapid City. Jeff and I, this is our fourth trip.
Welcome.
And it's been wonderful to get to know a little bit about South Dakota. I'm going to just hit a few high points. Several of you told me you actually read this report. Thank you very much. I'm just going to hit a few high points, but then open up for mostly conversation and question. I think it's important to highlight, Jeff and I both consult nationally. So we are in and out of a lot of communities in the course of a year. And this community has some amazing strengths to build on. And so I want everything we said in the report is really built on the history of the good work you've already done. I'm not going to run through these, but just to say it's unusual to see the kind of physical plant that you have with the potential for really developing amazing services and building on what you've already done. And you all are more familiar with the challenges than we are, but you know, when we were brought in, it really was to do a look across the behavioral health system. Jeff and I can't think about mental health without thinking about substance use disorders. And so the work we've done is in that context. And we've identified these challenges, which we've tried to address at least some of them. We did a survey. All of this is in the report. I think we interviewed about 80 people altogether, somewhere around there, met with lots of groups, and then we also brought perspective from other places. The two things we really want to focus on just to highlight, and this is true of a lot of systems, we feel like with all of the different parts that you have already functioning in the system, it's important to pull all of those together under an overarching framework. And the one we work with most is a recovery-oriented system of care, which is really built on it's really a public health approach built on the fact that people live in the community. They may go into treatment, but they go back to the community. And so we're really recommending a community-wide approach. And if you read the report, when you read it, you'll hear that throughout. And wanted to just also highlight, because this isn't in the recommendations, because frankly, I think it's fair to say this, we didn't know what to recommend about this. The psychiatric shortage is a national crisis. The number of psychiatrists in the country who are over the age of 55 continues to grow. We're not growing them as quickly. So the situation you're in here in Rapid City is one we encounter pretty much everywhere we go. The moments of hope we're seeing really are around partnerships with residency programs. When I talk about lifestyle recruiting, what I mean there is I do think Rapid City, like some other Western cities I'm working with, has something to offer to people if you put it in the context of come here to work, we have access to the out of doors, all these resources, and we're going to allow you a work schedule that lets you access those things, because that apparently is working to attract younger psychiatrists in several of the other places out west that I'm working. And then some recommendations around how we use psychiatrists, and a state level recommendation, which is to access a Medicaid detail, which would help a little bit, but not as much in South Dakota as it would in states that have expanded Medicaid, which is to expand the collaborative care codes. So these were the recommendations. And I think let me see here. Let me just say a little bit about a couple of these. The Care Campus we see as a huge resource for the community. And we're recommending that the current crisis unit is expanded to, not expanded in terms of beds, but the focus is shifted to become a crisis stabilization unit. So people in crisis would be brought there rather than to the emergency room at the hospital, and could be treated there for 3 to 5 days, which our experience is that most people can stabilize in 3 to 5 days if there's a comprehensive community plan. If not, they could be hospitalized on the inpatient unit at regional. We met with all the sheriffs from the surrounding counties and heard clearly, again, you are not unique to the West, but heard clearly the need for support for them for crisis situations. And so we're recommending that you implement a telehealth crisis service out of that crisis stabilization unit to support them so that they would have access with technology to a behavioral health provider right on site where they are out in the community. We're recommending an increase in the number of psychiatric beds, some additional studies. We did not touch the what happens with children and adolescents in Rapid City, except that we met with some folks from the school. We feel like that's a really important area for you all to look at because that's the future. And we'd like to not be here in 20 years having this conversation again about a new generation. And then I think the other thing we're really recommending is that in a very intentional way, people who have received services in the system, who are receiving services in the system, that their voice needs to be incorporated in all planning and implementation activities. Do you want to add anything?
The only other thing I would add, and it's in there, is there's quite a bit of data that the Care Campus in particular has generated, which is great. Taking that data to the next level to be able to trace whomever comes through, where they go, and developing those relationships in the community between providers so that they can share data back and forth to help people be tracked through the system. So we know that if they came to the Care Campus for several nights and they got referrals to a provider in the community, that those referrals actually happened. So using data to further inform how people are moving throughout the system would be one of the recommendations.
You want to add anything?
Really nothing to add. I mean, it's data-driven decisions, right? To make good policy and better help. Yeah.
Right to the
Sure.
mic. Mr.
I'm sorry,
Gasper.
I was just echoing
That's okay, sir.
the importance of the data-driven decisions, to inform the policy and changes that hopefully will be implemented.
Mr. Castleberry, you worked in the system for a long time and had made some really positive changes for Rapid City. What do you think is the next step, sir?
Well, I think there's an
Lot of
opportunity,
steps,
and Joan can speak to this, but for, more research, committees to get together, get stakeholders together to explore the recommendations, look for ways to implement. The sheriff has been quite helpful in keeping a discussion alive at the state level, also the federal level. Some of these things will be economic driven for sure, and there's an opportunity for them to be part of the solution, I think.
Thank you, sir. Any questions? Commissioner LaCroix?
I don't have so much as a question as, I really like the idea of this recovery-oriented system of care. I look back in the history of Rapid City and where we were and where we are now. We've come a long ways, and what I mean by that is the treatment of some of the people in our community. At one time, it was just focused on if it's the alcoholism, that's what we dealt with. We didn't deal with the dual diagnosis, working with the core part of the problem, because everybody thought it was just getting them off the alcohol or the drugs was the main thing. And I think our community has come a long way as far as realizing we got to find out what the core of the problem is. Mental health is one of the core parts, and when you get into dual diagnosis, you got to work with everything. And I think your study has done an awesome job as far as figuring out where we're at now, what we need to do. I think we've got a lot of these conversations. I'm involved with a lot of groups that we're just scratching the surface on some of the stuff that you've identified. But that's just it. We just scratched, but now we've got actually a plan that we can refer back to. And I think you guys presenting that and doing that hard work gives us that to go back to it and to be able to move forward and show to the other people what we need to do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lloyd.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Drews?
As you saw from the data that we have a strong public-private relationship going forward here. And that's really part of the basis for getting this all going to where it is at this point in time. And so we're always looking for ideas of how to draw the private in with the public. And so I think your information is very interesting from that standpoint. Obviously, there's foundations around that are available for assisting with this and so forth. But any further assistance that you can provide or suggestions that you can provide would be really appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Can I just say one thing about that? Because I think that's one of the things that sets you apart, and I think it's partly your size. You know, it's hard in a city. I live outside of Philadelphia. Okay, it's hard for Philadelphia. Philadelphia has a lot of public-private partnerships, but not that have the kind of impact on the ground that yours do, because they're, you know, Comcast. Okay, that's kind of a big private. But I think one of the things that I think struck both Jeff and I, and that we're seeing in some other places, is this, you know, this number 13 looks kind of like a soft recommendation, right? Educate the community about behavioral health and wellness. But we're seeing some really nice examples across the country where whole large corporations are taking on mental health first aid, which is a training the National Council manages, so I'm familiar with that one, and saying we need to train all of our workforce because all of us are impacted by behavioral health issues. And I think as people are more educated, they're more likely to partner. And so I think that's, you know, that's kind of one thing that's embedded in here, is to really try to bring the whole community. All of us live with internalized stigma around behavioral health challenges, whether we're a family member, a professional, or just, you know, someone who maybe never has been touched in their family. And education really is what helps us understand at a deeper level and be more likely to be open, you know, rather than just saying, well, stop drinking, like you said. So that's my immediate thought, but we'll continue to ponder that.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner LaCroix.
Just in response, you're absolutely right. I mean, the education part is, and I think that's where we're going, is that mental health. A lot of people have the conceived notion that it's someone yelling and screaming and out of control, but they don't see the depression part of it, some of the lower level ones that create big problems in the future, and that's kind of what I was referring to. And so you're absolutely right. The education and the stigma is kind of taken away, and we're taking a look at the hard facts.
Thank you.
And one
Go
other
ahead.
comment. I think the education piece, which is in here, is a big component of that is this vision around recovery-oriented
Yes.
system of care, and not only educating around what mental illness and substance use conditions are, but that the community has a vision for that, which includes the fact that people can recover. Even people that seem as though they're very sick can get better, get jobs, become taxpayers, get involved in the community. And it's through that vision and the education associated with the vision that all happens. So.
And I agree. I think I liked when I read through this, I read through it online, but I liked it requires a community-based approach to building out the continuum of care needed to support people with behavioral health conditions. And it does require state and federal help in order for us to
Yes.
move forward as well. So I think with everybody working together as a group through the state, through the county, through the city, I think we can get it done. I think like you guys have said, our private public partnerships have been good, but we could do better. So with your help, thank you for helping us move forward and where we need to go for the future, and seeing our vision as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks. We do have a speaker request on this, Mr. Chuck Henry. Morning,
Hi,
Chuck.
I am a person with behavioral health issues. One of my biggest one is the mood swings I have with my bipolar and that, but with medication and education through BMS and that, we've learned a lot. And I would like to thank this group for even doing a study in Western South Dakota, because when funding from the state comes, it goes mostly to the East River part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck.
Thanks, Chuck.
Any other questions? Discussion? Not? Thank you very much. Item 13 is Rapid City Regional Airport improvements. Thank you for helping them, PJ.
No problem. Good morning, Commissioners. PJ Conover, Director of Planning Department. I'm here to introduce item 13 today, which is the Rapid City Regional Airport Future Development. About a week ago, the county received some letters about some work that the city is going to do to improve the wastewater treatment system around the airport, also on property owned by the city that's outside city limits, and then also in just regular county property. And before you today is Patrick Dame. He's the director of the Rapid City Regional Airport, and he's here to seek your views and your comments on the possible social, economic, or environmental effects of the project you're about to hear about. So with that, I'll leave it to Patrick. Thank you.
Thanks, PJ. Madam Chair, members of the commission, I appreciate the opportunity to come up here. I've also got Rod Sen with KLJ with me as well. I'm the executive director of the Rapid City Regional Airport. Getting into the project here, essentially we're looking at the existing condition. We've got about a 1.1 acre lagoon that's been there for a number of years. It was built in the late 60s. Currently is in non-line lagoon. We have gone through and done a number of tests on this facility over the last few years, had some monitoring wells put in it. But we also started a feasibility study back in 2016 to look at the replacement of this lagoon. For as much as there's been a lot of discussion on this topic as of lately, really this lagoon has been getting to the point where it's needed to be replaced. And when we do a large federal project, it typically takes about 5 years to get to get funding and everything in place. So we started this project a couple of years ago, working towards looking at the feasibility of getting it replaced, what the needs are going to be based on our traffic load, based on our traffic growth, and then getting into the environmental assessment process. So we started the environmental assessment process late last year and have been working through that process. We're now getting into the agency notification phase of that project. Thus is why you guys got the letter that you did on that. So we have been working through this particular project. Based on, as you've seen in the news, we've had some tremendous growth. This year we're looking at about 350 to 360,000 passengers. So we've added air service, which means we've added people to the terminal, car washes, and everything that comes along with it that can add to the lagoon. We ended up doing a lot of pumping this summer on that lagoon and having that hauled off site in an effort to keep the lagoon level stable. We did get to a point where we were a few inches from the lagoon breaching its banks. Based on that, we contracted a company to do about 200,000 gallons of effluent hauling out of the lagoon. So, a lot of that was not necessarily based on the increased traffic. It was based on the fact that we had so much rain coming, basically over the last 12 months. The ground's been pretty saturated. Where we typically don't get to a point where we've got runoff coming into the lagoon, we had a lot of storm runoff coming down the hill and going into the lagoon, which was raising the lagoon level even higher than where it was at. So for as much as we think the existing traffic load would have been sustainable on that, the added stormwater runoff into it didn't help the situation any. So, but as we look at the growth into the future, the existing lagoon level is too small to meet the future load. And, we've been aware of that and have been working towards a solution to get it taken care of. So based on that, in the initial study that we did, we had a number of alternatives that were narrowed down to 2 primary alternatives. And the no action alternative. An aerated lagoon being one of the primary, that's a covered system with ammonia treatment, and then a connection to the Rapid City Water Reclamation Facility. Based on this, this slide shows you you can see the existing lagoon, and you can also see what would be the proposed aerated covered lagoon with a liner inside of it, and then a discharge drainage system. With that, there'd be a bit of permitting that would come along with this process, and what we looked at is that the benefits of this is a lower upfront cost. Some of the negative side of it is we would have higher O&M costs, and we would look at needing to, it would require that we have a licensed operator for the system. So based on that, there's just some positives and negatives for that. The other option, we have the other alternative, we have 2 options for that we're looking at. And that is a private connection to the city sewer treatment plant. So if you look at the line in purple, I know it's kind of hard to see, but the yellow arrows are pointing towards it, would be a connection line that we would run over. It'd be a gravity feed down to a lift station and that you see identified, and then a force main that comes across city-owned parcels that are indicated there in green, and then follow through over and down Dunn Road to connect to the city's 42-inch sewer main. The other alternative portion of this one is to look at taking it all the way down to 44 and then bringing the force main back up 44 within the right-of-way. So we've met with the city and talked with them about their ability for the 42-inch to sustain it, and they've indicated that that doesn't seem to be an issue at this point. From the commission, part of our side is working with you to for the ability to go down Dunn Road on that, and so that's essentially where we are in the process today. And we're going through the environmental portion for both alternatives, but then also for the secondary routing for the pipeline that goes along there. So we're looking at something that's going to, again, service, all the way through until the city moves to a point at which they're ready to make their giant regional expansion for that, if that, for lack of a better term, which, the airport is a big part of, based on our discussion, is a big part of them needing to do whatever regional stuff they would do in the future. So that maybe would even pass that out longer based on the fact that the development has just not been as intense towards the airport for that. So getting this taken care of, we're seeking a federal grant on this. So working with the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, to get federal funds to be able to make the installation of the project. Schedule. Again, we're looking at the environmental assessment now. We hope to have that completed in January of 2020. Moving on design and easement coordination in 2020, bidding late 2020, construction potentially late 2020 into 2021 is a primary project schedule. So much like I said, when you start to look at a 5-year period, you can see as we started studying this thing through to completion, we're going to have about a 5-year period in getting it through to fruition. So we're anticipating 90% federal funding. And then a 10% local share that'll be split between the airport and the state of South Dakota. So with that, Madam Chair, I would take any questions that you guys may have.
Thank you.
Madam
Any
Chair.
questions? Commissioner LaCroix?
So you're looking for some input from the commission as what our preference would be? Am I correct?
Essentially, this is the environmental forum where, again, we get into the public side of it. And Rod, really, what is it that we're...
Basically, we're just looking if you've got any thoughts on either of the alternatives, not
That's-
necessarily a preference, but if you've got any concerns with either of the alternatives,
Okay.
basically what we'd be looking for at this time.
Because my comment would be that I would prefer that you hook up to the city wastewater treatment. That's instead of doing a lagoon. That's the way I look at it. I think it may be the more heavier cost burden at the beginning, but it's the long-term solution.
Thank
Madam
you.
Chair,
Commissioner Roskinek?
I agree with Lloyd. I think any option that you can look at that you don't need to pay an operator on an annual basis, because an operator is going to be a significant cost, and if the federal government's going to pick up 90%, I'd say let's spend the money up front and spend our money down the road a little more wisely.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Drews?
I would agree with both Commissioner Roskinek and LaCroix. It appears to me that we're never going to get smaller in this business. It's only going to continue to grow. And so if you don't take that option of tying in with the city, I think that eventually down the road, you're going to be looking at that again. And so my recommendation would be that we go for that. Thank you.
Thank you. So you're going to have a 42-inch line with a lift? Is that what basically you're saying?
No, we're tying into a 42-inch line that exists today.
So what size is yours going to be, your line?
I believe we're looking right now, preliminary numbers, we're like an 8-inch gravity line with a 4-inch force main.
So my question is, can people tie in on that small line that's in that area, or is that just on airport property, then goes into a 42-inch? In case, I mean, there's connection fees, there's other things in case people out there want to connect to the sewer line that you guys are putting out there?
The best way to answer that question right now is tie-ins would potentially affect the federal share of the program.
Right.
So thereby reducing the federal share. This is a line that would be intended for use of the airport and tied to federal grant assurances. So the ability to tie in could have an impact on the airport's funding as a percentage to the project.
Guess I'd
So as
like,
we look at it right now, this would be 90% federal funded with little or no decrease in the federal funding side. From the public side, there's potential that you know, if there are any public connections to it, that anything from that connection forward could get ruled ineligible.
that's the only thing that I would probably have an issue with, is because you're making this big a line, you're taking it through a lot of people's property, and if you're thinking future growth, guys, and this line, are they gonna make a separate line? I mean, what are they gonna do for the future, putting this much money into something and not having the public, which, if you figured out, those tax dollars are federal, state, or otherwise not being able to tie into this line. I know you need help, that airport, since I was on the city council, needed some type of sewer system there, but my only concern would be those connection fees or something that would be able to tie people in that area to be able to use this line for the future, so that would be my concern.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner DeSanto.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that was kind of my line of thinking as well. But I guess an even deeper question is how is the airport funded? Is it funded by your business, or are we funding the airport operations, daily operations of the airport?
The airport right now is pretty self-sustainable.
Okay.
So when you look at when we do federal projects, we get what's called federal entitlement funds that are based on how many tickets are purchased and how many people fly out of our airport. That categorizes us, ranks us nationally, and puts us on a list for how much funding we get out of that. Based on that, the airport receives no regional or local tax dollars, and any local match comes from airport funds and airport user fees that come along with it. Those may include passenger facility charges. They may include just our normal operating budget. But right now, we do not add to the taxable mill levy of the city. So, you know, from a funding standpoint, we are self-sustainable.
Okay, and if we were to, as Deb pointed out, if we were to utilize those funds that are available to tie into the city water without being able to use that new main that you put in, if there's new development going on out there, then the taxpayers have to fund an additional source in order to get a tie-in to the city main. And I also have to point out, because it seems like we always forget, that federal dollars, those are our dollars. They're not federal dollars. The feds don't make any money. They make money from the taxpayer. That's where they get their money. So the bottom line is, no matter where you get the money, whether it's from the city, the state, or the feds, it's coming out of our pockets at one point in time or another. So, like I said, I appreciate what Deb had to say as far as if the taxpayer, or if we're going to provide this new main, the city's going to maintain that main, but we're not going to have the ability to tap into that main for new residential neighborhoods or businesses or whatever that go on out there. That's kind of a concern for me too. Whereas if we did the lagoon system, then the airport, which is supposed to be a business that's making money, would be responsible for the future operations of that lagoon, rather than an ongoing funding from the city.
So can you, Mr. Patrick, or what's your name from KLJ, sir?
Rod.
Rod? So the property you have outlined in the gold is airport, but the rest is, are you going through, is Dunn Road the road that you're following into the sewer main?
Correct. Everything shown in yellow there is currently owned by the city. From, it's a north-south road.
Radar Hill Road.
Radar Hill Road over toward, on Dunn over to the 42-inch existing line would be either county right away or private. The airport would have to obtain easements from private property.
So Rod, there also is a rule in the city if you're a certain amount of feet from a sewer main or that you have to hook up. So, if any of these properties are close to the sewer main and you're putting it through, don't they legally have to hook up to it? If it's city land, you just said?
I guess that would be a question we'd have to go through with the city. At this point, we met with them yesterday. That point did not come up. Again, I think part of the problem is if it's put in with the federal money, any private use of that's going to have to be paid back at some point or cost shared up front.
Right.
And we don't even know how they're going to, until we get through the environmental process and we get toward the actual picked alternative, and we won't even be able to get into those discussions with them.
Okay. I would look into the connection fees or something that might make a difference to anybody beforehand. I would check with the properties around there if anybody was going to connect, because that also would save you costs. It'd also be a lot more cost effective for their properties, and you probably will start getting maybe subdivisions and things coming around that area for that reason, thinking they can use that sewer line. So anytime you're putting that big a connection from one place to another that far away, it opens up for development. So we already know that once you have a sewer line, you're going to have a hard time telling people that they can't connect. It's the airports. Make sense? So I'm not against what you're doing, sir. I just know from being city and county before, those sewer lines are few and far between, same as water lines. And people need those in order to do development or just basically for their property. So it's a huge thing to the people for taxpayer dollars, putting in a well or putting in a sewer line or a mound or a sewer system. Sometimes costs you a lot less than connecting into a line. So just something to food for thought. Not against your project. It's a good idea.
Understand.
Madam Chair,
Thank you.
Madam Chair, thank you.
Commissioner Ross, connect.
that 4-inch, that'd be forced, right?
Correct.
And so I don't know that you could really tie in a subdivision to a 4-inch forced main.
There's ways it can be done. It's just not as easy.
They'd have to upgrade that lift station.
That was just a concern that I had.
Yes, sir. Any other questions?
Madam Chair, I guess the only other thought that I have is, obviously, you're going to be doing an environmental study, so we'll know which decision would, or which alternative would create the least amount of effect on the Rapid Creek drainage after that environmental study is done.
Madam Chair, Commissioner DeSanto, that's correct. I mean, we'll have a preferred alternative that'll come out of the environmental process.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? Nope. Thank you for the presentation. Just ideas for food for thought, not against your project.
Nope, understand very much. Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Rod. Thank you, Patrick. Number 14 is discretionary formula. Mr. David Luss, please. Morning, sir.
Good morning. Commissioners, appreciate you hearing me out. I feel, there's that saying on radio, long-time listener, first-time caller, and so that's kind of me today. I've listened and watched you guys for a while, but I've never appeared in front of you, so I would ask that you be gentle.
We're always gentle to you, Mr. Lust.
I bring to you today an ordinance regarding adopting a discretionary formula for affordable housing. And I first want to thank Jay and Janet and Gordon for the help they've lended in putting this together and kind of troubleshooting some of the concerns they had. We met, I believe it was last week or the week before, and worked through some of the concerns. And I really appreciate them spending the time and effort and bringing this forward. So as you are probably aware, the state has various categories in which a county can adopt a discretionary formula. Manufacturing, industrial, I believe there's rural subdivisions, which I think Pennington County has right now. And this last legislative session, the legislature adopted another category of property in which the counties may adopt a discretionary formula, and that is affordable housing. And frankly, this idea had its genesis with Shannon Rittberger, a discussion I had with him about what we can do for affordable housing to incentivize developers to move into this space. And he indicated he was not inclined, nor am I, to develop or adopt a discretionary formula that incentivized market-based apartments and housing. Frankly, that sector does not need an incentive. But unfortunately, the statutes didn't allow the commission to narrow and be more targeted and say, we're going to give a discretionary formula for the need, which is affordable housing. And so that led to the development of legislation, which the legislature adopted this year, to allow counties now to incentivize affordable housing via discretionary formula. And some of the material I provided in advance it involved the Vukovic housing study. And that study basically revealed there's a shortage of about 4,000 affordable units in the Rapid City area. And that term affordable gets thrown around quite a bit. Sometimes it's workforce, sometimes it's low-income housing, affordable housing. Generally, what that study identified was two tranches of housing shortage there, and I'll tie it to rents. Basically, there's about a 1,500 to 2,000 unit shortage in rents $500 and below, and about the same $500 to $900 per month. This ordinance would really, in my mind, address the kind of the $500 to $900 range. I don't think it's feasible to get developers to look at building affordable housing with $500 and low without many more incentives, low-income housing tax credits and some of the other programs that are out there, both federal and state. So what this ordinance would do would again provide a benefit to developers to look at that $500 to $900 a month space and lower the difference between the cost to build and the rental income. And as I've looked at this housing issue, it's really to simplify it. You have your costs to build up here, you have the rental income from affordable housing down here. So there's this gap. And if you're a developer and you look at that gap, you say, why would I possibly get into affordable housing? That the income does not sustain the costs. Well, concepts like this ordinance help close that gap. And so a developer, it becomes more manageable and feasible for a developer to look at building units that are affordable. And this is not going to be a silver bullet. If you pass this, you're not going to see a flood of developers suddenly rushing in to build affordable housing. But again, it lowers that gap, and maybe if you stack that and low-income housing tax credits and some other benefits, you can get it so the developer can feasibly look at this and say, you know what, I'll do that. It's not the high margins I could get maybe for building a full market housing, but there's a need, and I'm going to fulfill that need, and I can do it in a cost-efficient manner. So what this discretionary formula does is it requires a developer via covenant on the property to agree that for 10 years this property will be affordable housing and they will comply with the AMI requirements at 60%. And we've worked through the issues on what that looks like, what a covenant looks like, and what some of the issues might arise if a developer doesn't comply with the terms. And I think Jay Alderman is comfortable with the remedies that are available for that. So this is just another tool. There aren't many, as you guys know very well. There just aren't many tools available to get developers to build in a certain space.
And this is an opportunity for the county to say, yeah, we recognize the need for affordable housing, we recognize their issues, and we're taking a step, a significant step in the direction of assisting developers to build affordable housing. So that's kind of the broad strokes of it, and I'll be happy to stand by for questions. I know there are here others here to testify as well.
Well, Mr. Less, just, can you tell us the difference? I asked Shannon yesterday and asked you the other day, can you tell me the difference with the TIF or discretionary formula for the public so they know why because I know the city's working on TIFs for affordable housing and now we're coming and doing discretionary formula. Can you tell me the difference?
Yeah, I mean, so a TIF is going to help the developer with infrastructure, right? It could be sewer, timely given the last discussion item. It could be sewer, it could be roads to build out to the property, fulfill the infrastructure needs of the property. The discretionary formula that's proposed here today really has more to do with the rent. It's tied to rent. You've got to keep it affordable. It's a tax abatement, so I think the proposal here is to go 20, 40, 60, 80, 100 over a 5-year period. So I guess they're related in the sense that they both can help lower the cost for a developer, but they're unrelated in the sense of how they work and how they're implemented.
So tell me what you mean by abatement. So I start at $100,000 property. I save 20%.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll walk through that. So I'll use this example. So say a developer has a lot that's worth $100,000. This formula does not apply to the value of that lot. But say that developer puts $1 million worth of improvements on that lot. That's what we're talking about here. That's what would be abated. So in the first year, the developer pays essentially tax on on 200,000. The next year, 400,000, 600,000, 800,000 until you get to the full value. So that's how it's graduated. It frankly comes at a time that's the most advantageous to a developer when they're renting up. That's the most vulnerable time for a developer before they're fully occupied. And so this has the biggest bang, the biggest benefit early on in the process.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner DeSanto, please.
I mentioned this in a discussion before on affordable housing, and I want to mention it again, but part of the reason that people aren't building affordable housing, it's multi-pronged. Part of it is the cost of building and making up and becoming profitable, renting out all their units and becoming profitable. But it's my understanding from talking to a lot of these developers, it's not so much the cost of building the place, it's the cost of maintaining it. That when you build affordable housing, unfortunately, you tend to get people that don't care about where they live and they destroy the place. And then the cost of keeping that place up is where the cost comes in. So this might incentivize some developers to come and do that, but I don't think it's going to make a huge impact just because the idea seems to be it's not the cost of building the place and becoming profitable over a period of time at $500 to $900 rent. They can do that. It's becoming profitable when you're constantly having to repair those units and put them back together again after they've been destroyed when people move out. So I'm not sure how much good this is going to do.
And you know what? I don't disagree with anything you said. And when I look at it that way, and because I've examined it that way, this isn't gonna lead to a rush of people building affordable housing. It just won't. But on the flip side, if it does, if you can incentivize 50, 100, 200, 500 units that wouldn't otherwise be built, I think that's worth the endeavor. And you're absolutely right. The cohort of people in some affordable housing is higher maintenance, and eviction rates are higher. And if you can minimize those eviction rates, as a whole, it's a multifaceted issue. This isn't going to solve the problem, but it does, I think, represent a good step by the county to recognize the need, to incentivize some builders to get into the space. Doesn't address your concern, your issue, rightfully identified, of what happens after you get it full and those type things. But it does lead to more more units getting built, or hopefully will.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner.
just to follow up on that, I guess the reason I'm mentioning it is so maybe the public can become aware, the public that's complaining that we don't have affordable housing in Rapid City can start thinking about, if we want affordable housing in Rapid City, then they need to start thinking about the way that they're living and taking care of the affordable housing, and then there'll be more affordable housing in Rapid City. I guess that's the point I'm trying to make.
Valid point.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Rosknecht.
Hi, Dave.
How are you?
I got a few questions.
Very good.
What's in the pipeline right now that meets this criteria? Is there anything in Rapid City that we can consider affordable that they're following this 60% and
That's being either contemplated or under construction right now.
in the pipeline?
Yeah, and that's something I just don't know, Commissioner. I've got some ideas of some of the developers, and I've talked to some of the developers. Some models involve mixed income, so it's tough to say if it averages out to this or not. And I know Handy Shaffy's got some larger projects going, and there are some others that are considering it, but I have not.
I mean, I like this idea because I want to help the needy, not line the pockets of developers.
Yep.
I want a developer to have a fair chance. I don't want them to take advantage of a good program. Another question I had, who does the monitoring? So let's say we do the resolution, they build these. Who's going to go out there and monitor to make sure that those rents are affordable?
So the process would be, the covenant will include a certification process each year, that the owner has to certify to the county that it is compliant with the statute for that 10-year period. Really no different than what the state requires in a lot of LIHTC funding and other programs, a certification process, but it would be the same.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure there's some mechanism in to protect the folks that are out there renting, that their rent doesn't get out of those limits.
And what we discussed with Janet Saylor and Jay Alderman was really kind of the penalty provision for falling out of compliance is very severe. It's basically a disgorgement of all the tax benefits you've received. So it's not going to be something that a developer could take lightly, because if they fall out of compliance, there's going to be a severe penalty.
So my last question would be, let's say we do this and all of a sudden, 10 years from now, we don't have this affordable housing problem, then we do another resolution dissolving the increment taxation.
My understanding would be you can implement this and withdraw it at any time.
Okay, that was
those who would be in the pipeline then, who were eligible initially,
right,
would still be able to finish out the program. But yeah, you could withdraw at any time.
Thank you, Dave.
You're welcome.
Commissioner LaCroix.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, thank you to the staff and David for doing all the work on this. I think this is a tool for the toolbox as far as being able to help. I think building is a problem as far as, and that's why they look at multiple different ways to get that done. As a person who's worked with a community development with Barb Garcia for affordable housing, David, you explained it well. So often we focus on the under 500, and the 500 to 900 is tough for rentals in our area. I have rental properties, and very rarely, I don't think I've only got one that's under 900. And that's just because in order to do it and do the maintenance on them, you got to be able to charge the money that you need to operate. And so that's the problem that I see in our community is you're absolutely right, that 900 is probably about the sweet spot of what people can really afford and be able to live with. So I see this as this resolution, and it's good that the state moved forward as a tool. I think at any point in time, if we see that it's not working, they did some great work of saying, hey, if you're not following this, we're going to abate you and get the money back and you're done. I think that's some good work that you guys did with this resolution.
Thank you. I think it's a good tool to use. I did talk to Shannon how it worked, and I agreed with it. How it's going to be used and what's going to happen with it is more my concern after the fact. If it's used right, It's going to be very efficient if it's used wrong, meaning if you build big, huge units, apartment units with $500 and $900 rents, are you going to create slums? So I like the mixed income approach. Coming from a family of low income, it worked with our area because we had people with money and some of us didn't have as much. And it gave us that feeling that that's where we want to go when we get older, kind of thing. Instead of, if you know what I'm saying, if you put people in one area and all they see is depressed, or you put it in a building, we do rents 900 and under, and what happens is 90% of those people, believe it or not, are good. But that 10%, and you stick that 10%, which becomes more percentage in 450 unit or 250 unit area apartment, you're going to get a whole different result. So that would be my only concern is the mixed income approach, and what you're doing for this discretionary formula is going to be good, but how you do it and implement it forward and where you do it at. If it's always on the same area, the same side, or the same area that's already depressed, and you put more in that area that way, you're gonna create more of a problem with this $500 to $900 rent. So mine is, the tool is really good. And like anything, you know, Mr. Lust, anything in moderation can be really good. Anything overdone could cause more problems in the end. And we have areas that right now we're having that because we're not monitoring, as Commissioner, I think it was Ross Connect was saying. People are building stuff and they're not monitoring their areas and actually they're collecting money, but they don't really care about the people that are in there. So I would hope that developers, it's not just lining their pocket, it's actually to help the people that actually need this formula. And to me, Mr. Lust, I believe in my heart you do it for the right reasons. I've seen your work before and what you're doing, and Mr. Solano as well. You've been working with him, and Solano came from the same area I did, so I do know his heart's in the right place, and so is yours. So I'm in agreement with what you're doing, sir.
I appreciate that.
Thank
Madam
you.
Chair,
Commissioner
I'd
Corey.
move to approve the resolution of affordable housing and removing the rural subdivision land. That'd be 10-635.
Motion by LaCroy.
Second.
Second by Drews. Any other discussion?
Madam Chair, one more point of discussion. I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, David, that anywhere in the resolution does it address where they can put these things. So that's not, it's not going to be ruled by us. It's going to be the developer's decisions where they put this. So we won't be able to control where these places where they're going.
If they're in Pennington County, we will.
Well,
If the city decides to do this, and that would be their issue, Commissioner DeSanto, but if it's in our area, we can control that and we can do it right. So hopefully, that's what we're kind of using it for, is for the rural areas as well. So I believe it can be a very positive for us. Okay. Oh,
Just
any
for
other discussion?
clarification, it's the motions for resolution to approve removing the rural subdivision land. The first resolution that's in our packet. You know what I'm saying? I'm just
So you
reassuring.
can't do this in the rural areas? Is that what you're saying?
There's two options.
Yeah, there's two resolutions. That's why I wanted just
Okay.
to make sure we're clarified. 10-635 yeah, Jay can help us out.
Jay Alderman with the State's Attorney's Office. The original, or I should say the current resolution you have, I think it's on the second page of your packet. It has a first paragraph, and I'm not entirely sure why it resulted in this, but it says for all of those initial types of discretionary formulas, they shall be 100% taxable. We felt that that's a bit of an oxymoron because, of course, they're 100% taxable unless you apply some other formula to them. So that no longer needs to be in there. I think Shannon thought it was correcting any confusion out there about formulas you used to have and then didn't want to have. And so you did a resolution 12 years ago, 2007, to say those particular ones are all 100%. I don't think that no longer needs to be in there. It's now 12 years later. I think that's pretty obvious. And none of those have a discretionary formula. So we're proposing removing that. Shannon Rittberger and Gordon's here if you want to address it. The SDCL 10666, which is the residential. Gordon, is that correct? The residential discretionary formula? That's the one that Shannon thinks there's no longer a necessity for it and prefers to have that removed. So the only resolution today would remove those two and would only have in Pennington County adopting the affordable housing discretionary formula. That would be it. If you adopt this resolution today, that would be the only discretionary formula in Pennington County.
Okay. Thank you. I understand and got explained a little bit more from Gary. Before we finish this motion, we do have a speaker, Mr. Eric Braun. Thank you, David. Just.
Hello, my name's Eric Braun,
Morning,
Rapid City resident. Been on the Planning Commission for a long time in Rapid City and also worked in building and real estate development. I'm just here in support of this discretionary formula. As David mentioned, there are not a lot of tools to incentivize housing in meaningful numbers, and unfortunately that means, you know, if you're looking for 1,500 or 2,000 units, that's multifamily, and TIFs are very hard to use for multifamily. What we've had available to us is mainly state-directed federal funds for a long time, whether it's CBGB or tax credits or other things like that. I'll just echo again, this would be another tool in the toolbox, and more tools are definitely needed in order to address this issue. So I hope you can support this discretionary formula.
So can I ask you a question, Eric? Have you been involved with rental units between 500 and 900 units that are pretty big size apartments or anything?
I have not directly anything that averaged that. I have a multifamily building that has a few units that are under $900, but more that are over.
Okay, so you kind of do a mixed income approach as well?
Yeah. To be perfectly honest, my particular interest is trying to get a project aimed at that zone off the ground, and just coming into just what a struggle it is in order to make that work. I mean, it's hard to build things that fit that. It's hard to find a place to put things, to put a project that works, where the land costs and the utility costs support it. I mean, there's so many challenges, and your options are really limited on where you can go for assistance. And this is something, you know, again, I'll echo what Mr. Luss said, but the ability to get some help in the first few years of the development, that's the perfect time for it when you're trying to, you know, build a reserve in order to deal with some of the maintenance issues that come. You know, you'd like to believe that if you have a new apartment building that you won't have any costs right off the bat, but Murphy's Law doesn't work that way, you know, and when you have, you know, when you're trying to lease it up, you don't have a lot of bucks to spare for those things that come up. And this would very much help that. What you're trying to do is change people's decisions, get a developer from a no to a yes, or get them from market rate to a place that has capped rents. And once you build housing, it stays housing for a long time.
My bottom line is I'm not against housing. I'm just, we have many units that are between $800 and $900 right now. And to be affordable, people pay a little bit different in those areas than just a monthly rate. They just don't put up $800 just like that, $900. We have gave people those choices, but a lot of times we find it's easier that it's that formula has to change on that payment. So you got to have landlords and people willing to, when you get into those rates between $500 and $900, there's going to have to be some other discretionary formulas, as we call it, in order to maintain the people and for them to be able to stay in your buildings. So there's a lot of babysitting going on there in one sense, and the other, we have moved people out of our units into houses by showing them the next step. So I understand what we all want to do, and it's awesome. But we also have to see what those steps are and those formulas that if you want to go there, what you're creating in one sense, and there's a lot of need, and then there's a lot of help that needs to go on to that next step in that area. So again, I'm not against this. I just want to see who the developers are and see if they have done this before where they are actually not turning areas into slums or not caring about the people that they decide to put in these units. So that's my bottom line is I think this is going to work great if we get the right people. So, and I'm with you, Mr. Braun. I've seen your units and you keep your places very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
One more speaker.
Where'd he go? Annie here? Oh, there you are. You're sitting behind somebody over there. Come on up, sir. And your name, sir?
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Hani Shafi with Dream Design. We develop some properties in Rapid City, and we manage some of them ourselves. I just want to speak in support of this resolution. I want to thank Dave and his team for putting it together. We really need this in our community. As you know, the demand is there. It has been proved by the studies, and we all know people that really struggle with life. And for us who are capable or able to help, I think we really need to step up and do it. Managing apartments, just to give you an idea, the tax on each apartment is about $1,000 a unit. And the average rent is probably about, if you're in the high end, it's about $950 or $1,000. So the tax is about 10% of the revenue coming out of that unit. The hardest time to really, and I think Commissioner DeSanto had it on the nail, it really is a lot costlier to manage units with manage affordable units, but it is doable. We've done it and it worked. Yes, it takes a lot of babysitting, like Commissioner Hadcock mentioned, but it's doable. And this tool is probably the only tool that may attract developers to really start doing these affordable units. The hardest time of putting these units in the market is actually the beginning, while you're building them and trying to ramp up by renting them. The vacancy rates are higher than when they're 3 years old or 4 years old, because you're trying to attract people. And typically, the people who are renting these, they require approval of other agencies that help with their rent, and sometimes it takes 2 to 3 months or 4 months to get that approval. You cannot really commit to them and then say, okay, I'm going to wait the 4 or 5 months. So this may help the ability of waiting for them to get approval while the unit is sitting vacant. I think it's really helpful, and I urge you to support this resolution. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Here for any questions that you may have.
Annie, I'm assuming that a soft cost that would be higher for this affordable housing opposed to normal apartments would be the management, because you're going to have a lot more management fee trying to make sure that
if you hire a management company, yes. If you really try to manage them yourself, sometimes, it is a lot of work, but it is doable and still maintained within reasonable rates, less than what is really a management company would do. A lot of times you really need to help those people not only with just the deposit or what have you, but also transportation in some cases. Actually, our property managers sometimes have to drive people to the store or to the doctor appointment or stuff like that. And yeah, it is going out of their way to do it. It costs a little bit of money, but at the same time, it's a service that we don't have other people providing it within our community, and those who provide it still not able to satisfy the demand within our community. So I think together we could do it. I really do believe that.
No, I think it's a great tool, and it's not a new tool. This tool's been around for years.
Yes.
And anyhow, I'm in support of it very much.
Yeah,
Thank you, Henny.
Thank you.
The other thing is in the units, a lot of times if you're doing them between $500 and $900, the difference is the utilities. So, it's gonna be interesting to see on the utilities too, what is charged for utilities, or is that gonna be included? Because a lot of people, you're gonna get in there initially, but, what you're gonna find is with utilities and other things that aren't gonna be getting paid, you'll be removing people that don't, get that part of it. So that's why I said, people need to get into some of these units and rent some of these units like, what they're talking about. Because if they're gonna be doing it for 10 years, that's a big commitment.
Yeah.
And what that turnover is gonna be by not, having, the people they're talking about, the people we do, we don't subsidize that much where we're at, once in a while. But most of the people make it. It's just that you have to give them other tools besides just that rent.
Yes.
You have to do, again, you have to look into these things a little bit closer. We do have units where we do get subsidized, but you'd be surprised when you show people that next step. But again, like 27, 28 of our units that we have that, we don't have utility, we pay the utilities in the internet with that $800, $900 cost.
Yeah.
We also don't charge huge deposits.
Yeah.
So there's going to be all kinds of discretionary tools, and it depends on, like you said, what are you going to be doing in these units to move forward? I don't think people get all that. They just look at the $800, $900, and then they build these big, huge units, and then we have issues. And ask the police and the law enforcement and the first responders, it becomes pretty huge on their part as well.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. And, one of the things, we're doing actually 42 units with some commercial just down the street on East Boulevard and Kansas City Street, where those units just got torn down. And exactly what you just mentioned, we're trying to do mixed, income. So instead of doing separate utilities, we're doing a centralized, utility system where we add the cost of the utilities into the system, into the rent, and at the same time, include the internet and what have you, because a lot of these folks want to know exactly what they want to pay every month. And sometimes even if they're capable of doing, they really don't have the experience enough to really even take care of the utility bill. And at the end of the month, they cannot afford to pay it because the money has gone somewhere else. So by including it in the rent is basically eliminating one further step for them. And it works. We've done it in the past in 2 different projects, and it really worked. So we're hoping to do it again right in here. And it's a trial deal for a new project. We're utilizing exactly what you, Commissioner Hadcock mentioned, smaller size units, but it does not, we don't want to sacrifice the quality, because if you sacrifice the quality and keep the place look trashed, they will not respect it and they will make it trashier than what it is. But if you really maintain good quality and keep it clean, the tenants themselves, no matter how inexperienced or no matter who they are, they will tend to rise to the occasion and actually take care of it just as if they own it. So, but you just got to set the example to them, and that's what we try to do.
Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Commissioner LaCroix.
My comment is, I respect everybody's discussions on subsidized housing. In all reality, I look at this, when we're talking $900 a month rent is what a $35,000 a year job can afford. When you do the figure, and that's some of the average jobs in Rapid City. So, I mean, I respect all the discussion, but I look more at our workforce. For a single person making $30,000 to $35,000 a year in a manufacturing job, can afford $900 and still have money to be able to go to a movie and go eat and afford a car. That's what I kind of look at when we looked at the housing market for that, in that range. You know, I just wanted to defocus a little bit.
You're good. Anything else?
Madam Chair, could you have Commissioner LaCroix repeat the resolution?
Yes, sir.
It would be the first one on your agenda, which is the resolution approving affordable housing by removing the rural subdivision land. It's SDL 10-6 35.26.
Thank you. And there was a second by Gary. Okay. Any other discussion?
Nope.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, motion carries. Thank you, David, for your time today, sir. Chuck, did I forget you? Come on up, Chuck. Sorry.
You know, I'll get you after you about that. I'm a person that uses affordable housing, and it's the only way I could stay out of being on the streets and that. And when I've been running for city council, that's been part of my platform, is we're like working with Pennington County Housing and other agencies that do provide that. So I like this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. Sorry about that, Chuck. So we on item 15? Ms. Holly? Okay. Pennington County Housing and Redevelopment Commission presentation. Mr. Doug Wells is out today. And we have a presentation by one of the other.
Scudder.
Your name again, ma'am?
My name is Sharon Scudder.
Okay.
And I apologize. Doug's mother passed away Saturday. And so I don't know what you're going to ask me, but I've been in the housing field for 43 years, so maybe I could answer. I did bring some statistics if you needed to have some.
Madam Chair.
Basically.
Commissioner Lord Croy, you had brought some of this forward, so let's.
Yes.
Some of your questions, sir.
Sharon, I'd asked this presentation to the commission to kind of educate us on Pennington County housing. So often I've gotten a lot of calls or discussions, it has Pennington County housing on it. Does the commission run it? That type of stuff. What's it all do? I've also gotten questions on people who've been on a waiting list. What's the waiting list type thing? What kind of background checks do you do? And I've also seen, I'm just going to give you a deal so you can kind of work with, had contact with people that have had vouchers and have 15 days to find a job, find a place, and if they don't find it, it's that type of thing. So, I mean, those are some of the concerns that I have heard, along with sometimes the South Dakota housing itself, some of the problems that have occurred with some of the tenants. So
okay,
that was my reason for having you guys come give us a presentation to kind of tell us what you all do, where the money comes from, how it's distributed, who oversees it. Is it Pennington County Commission, or is it the board, or your board?
Okay, thank you. I'll be glad to try to answer some of those questions. First of all, I'd like to give you a little bit of background of what stock we do have. We have 463 units of public housing, and we have 149 of other housing, and we have 1,234 vouchers, and we have 149 VASH vouchers. Now, when you talk about Section 8, that comes from the federal government, and we monitor that through rules and regulations. They go on a waiting list, which I would like to share what our waiting lists are so you get an idea of what our waiting list is. For public housing, for one bedrooms, we have 1,533 people on our waiting list. For two bedrooms, we have 1,830 people on our waiting list. For three bedrooms, we have 1,017 people on our waiting list. And for four bedrooms, we have 304 people on our waiting list. We also have 2,909 people wanting vouchers. Okay, that is what we have available. When we only have 1,234 vouchers, we have double that waiting. The time, yes, is a very long waiting list. As far as vouchers go, when a person comes to the top of the list, the vouchers are given to the tenants. They are briefed after they've gone through criteria, tenant selection. They have to follow rules and regulations for tenant selection. One of those being that we would not house sex offenders. That's the main one. And then also we look at criminal history and background. Not so much on the Section 8 on landlords, because the landlord needs to do that follow-up themselves. We give them 60 days in which to find housing, and then they can also be expanded to another 30 days. Our problem is there's not very much affordable housing in South Dakota or in Pennington County that will receive vouchers because of the availability. A lot of landlords go market rent. So that's why they turn back their vouchers or that they can't get housed. It's not that the Pennington County Housing Authority takes the vouchers away. It's that they've extended all of their time to find housing. We have a lot of stock in housing. We have scattered housing. We have elderly housing, and we also have housing that work with the mentally handicapped in the Fox Run unit. So we try to partner with as many people as we can to provide services. We Our stock, you see the high rises in Sturgis, the Valley View, the Jackson Heights, the River Ridge, Memorial Park. Those are all projects of public housing except for Memorial Park is our current one, and that was built with mixed finance. And we have mixed finance, elderly or disabled living there. However, we have scattered housing throughout Sheridan Lake Road, La Crosse, Adams, Curtis Street. But we also find that it is a problem with many apartments to find mutual agreement with a lot of the tenants to get along, that sort of thing. So we hired a resident relations officer also that deals with problems, also helps with terminations, so that if tenants close to being terminated, the resident officer goes and helps them. And so we do try to keep up with the residents' needs also. So is there any other questions? I know the VASH vouchers are handled by the VA in partnership with the Public Housing Authority. We do the housing part, they do the services to the veterans.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Hold on, just a follow-up,
Just
sir.
follow up. What was that? You said residential
Officers.
officers to do for conflicts is
We have a tenant relations officer.
tenant relationship, and that works for the
All
apartments.
of our public housing.
All your public housing.
Mm.
Okay. Do you guys have a formal complaint or concern? I shouldn't say complaint, a concern form that if somebody has a problem with something in whether it's the housing or or neighbors that they could fill out?
We have, if they are seeking termination, we do have a grievance policy, but we also have a complaint system where they could call in a complaint or they can write a complaint and we follow up on the complaint.
Okay.
We do have to have enough specifics to work on the complaint, however. Sometimes people do it anonymously, which is okay. We can follow up on the complaint, but it's hard to get back to the person who complained.
Okay. My only other question would be if you could give those numbers that you gave us to Holly. So I've seen those numbers once before, but it's been a long time about the vacancy and then the amounts. I'd like to have a copy of those if I could.
We look at this every month, and so it is, we will get you a copy. We could send it to the chair and get you copies. Very happy to. Is there any other questions on the housing part?
Commissioner Ross?
Madam Chair, a couple questions. How many employees are in your department?
That I could not tell you. Doug handles the managerial part of it. We handle policy.
Month ago, I got a complaint about one of your scattered homes.
Staff person.
Scattered. Scattered housing.
Scattered housing.
About a tenant that, I'm all about people's property rights, and evidently this housing unit isn't being taken care of very good. And to me, that pulls other people's property values down. And they've been complaining and complaining, and I'm not going to go into details here. I think we got some people in the audience that want to ask you some questions, but it's pretty frustrating after a month of my time and emailing and working with Doug that we're not getting this resolved. And I certainly hope that we get this resolved sooner than later.
If you could just write out your complaint for the board, we'd be glad to look at that complaint, find out why, because we take pride in our units. And if if we have a tenant that isn't following the rules to maintain their unit, then there's preconditions.
I think we have some folks in the audience that can give you the particulars on this.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm not aware of them. I would have to get that like I say.
I guess, another question I had who does your enforcement again? Is there employees in that department that if there is a problem, that they go out and take care of it before they have to call law enforcement?
Depending if it's criminal, we do have police, we contract with police to go out and check out any criminal activity. If it's abiding the lease, then we have the resident relation officer follow up on the complaint to see if they're compliance with the lease. If they're not compliance with the lease, then they could face eviction.
Okay. I think that's all I had for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. I guess I've never heard of the tenant relationship officer, the resident officer. When we have had tenants that use South Dakota Housing, I have called, and the lady actually got mad at me because I said, is this my responsibility or is yours as the landlord? Of what we're having is people overloading these houses with more than the registered amount.
Right.
All I wanted her to do was go check and make sure that was happening. Wasn't my first time at this. It happens a lot.
Okay.
Again, I've never heard of the resident officer. She said, you're the landlord, do what you got to do. That's not an answer because we're trying to help people. All I want is some follow through from the program. I remember when we were kids, we had people coming over because we had 11 kids in our family. We had people actually coming and inspecting our house and making sure we were taking care of it and making sure, things weren't getting broken and stuff like that. But since I've been in the business the last 10 years or so, that's never happened.
Well, let me make it clear. The resident relation officer is for public housing. Now, if you're on a Section 8 vouchers, it is up to the landlord to maintain the lease or to comply with the lease. So if you're a Section 8 landlord, then if there's a complaint of more people being there than should be there, then it is up to the landlord to extend their lease to say, I'm sorry, you violated your lease, and you will either have to correct it or there will be an eviction. But on the Section 8 program, it is strictly up to the landlord to enforce their leases.
Okay, so maybe that's why you're having a shortage of housing in that area for Section 8 for that reason.
It could be because landlords don't want to, when they can get market rent people without rules and regulations, that's probably the reason why. But we have a lot of landlords that just maintain their leases, usually according to the lease that the contract
Yep.
that the Section 8 people sign, the landlord sign, then it is up to them to make the lease compatible. But yes, you're right, it could be landlords don't want to put up with the contract. That's a contract with HUD. It's not anything that we oversee the funding of it, and that's about it for the Section 8 program.
So you give the money for Section 8?
Yes.
Okay, so what I'm saying is maybe the formula should change, and what I mean by that is, I think there's a lot of landlords that do want to work with people, and they do want to have it, so they have people in there, but they can't do it by themselves, and if you're giving money, and here's where I'm at, if you're getting a voucher and you're getting money from the government, there needs to be some kind of respect there for not because we start with really nice places. We've actually helped buy beds and things like that for our people. So we are the landlords that are trying to help you to the next step. But we're finding no help from the other side when we're saying we can't enforce this every day. Somebody's got to do something with the money on some of these people or check something if they're violating or us saying, okay, they're violating this lease. Can you come over and help us? We need the other side to be able to. I think the waiting list would go a lot further down if people knew that you were inspecting and actually helping. Because for us, it's not about the money. It's about having a neighborhood that if that's my house and I own that house, I want them to be respectful to the neighbors and the neighbors to be respectful to them. And there's got to be some kind of help with that South Dakota housing in a sense that says maybe we need to change some of this and have inspectors or something. Because like I said, we had it when we were kids. It worked out good because we knew when the inspector was coming. So maybe there needs to be some kind of formula. I'm not saying you did it wrong before, but maybe moving forward, it needs to be a little bit different.
I wish we could. However, the Section 8 program is out of our hands and into HUD's. And all we do is we're the go-between for the funding to the landlord, and they set forth the contract. The contract is set forth and regulated by HUD regulations. It's not like public housing where we can get involved with the residents. So there is a big difference, and the contract is the difference. The landlord is the private sector with the contract with HUD, and that's why we don't get involved. I agree with you. I wished we could, but it's up to the landlord to say we want to evict this person because they violated this and this rule. It has to be according to the contract that they violated, and then we would take initiative to unfortunately terminate. And that's the only rules and regulations we have to follow. We give out the money and we can terminate. And that's just for the Section 8. It's not like public housing at all. If it ran like public housing, we would be able to intercede, such as you request. But it's not that way at all. The Section 8 program is completely different. It is merely we're in between for the money.
So the scattered housing is what you guys do inspectors and you have people check up on the people
Yes.
if there's a complaint, not the South Dakota housing.
Right, right. The public housing that we have that's scattered, that's not on Section 8,
Okay.
yes, we can monitor that very closely.
Okay, so maybe I was confused, but maybe I need to visit with HUD or something on some of their stuff, because most of the people that you get, unfortunately, in that take advantage of that is what I've seen. I don't kick people out because, I mean, they have to violate pretty bad. We try to, again, help to the next step and
Right.
set those rules and regulations beforehand, but.
And that's what we're hoping the Section 8 program does do. And we have a lot of great landlords that do help our people go through that. But with the Section 8, we don't have the regulation other than to inspect annually and to be the go-between monthly for the payment to the landlord. There's a contract between the housing authority and the landlord for those payments and the annual inspection. And basically, and the enforcement, you're the landlord enforcing the lease.
Thank
So
you,
they
Commissioner.
are two different entities.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner?
Sharon, thank you for clarifying some stuff. I mean, that was one of the main reasons why I think originally I'd gotten a concern and I was asked some questions, and I needed some answers, and that's why I asked you to be here. On the flip side, some other stuff has come to light. So today you're probably going to hear some concerns from some citizens who've had some problems, who want to express them to us as the commissioners. And so I would wish that you'd stick around and listen to their concerns and take them wholeheartedly, and just as we are going to. But I do thank you for clarifying the Section 8 deal, because that helped. I didn't know there was actually 60 days. I always, when people contacted me, they had 10 days. You know, so a lot of this stuff, I think a brochure for us commissioners or some guidelines so we can be able to pass it on to our constituents would be helpful. And being able to know about this residential officer is helpful too, in the inspections and some of the details of it. Because quite frankly, I wasn't sure how the money was handled for Section 8. I thought you guys divvied it up. I didn't know the money come to the county and we divvied it to you and you divvied it, you know, some places do something like that. So, but I just wanted to make you aware there are some people here that have some concerns that you're going to hear, and this wasn't set up that way. It's just the way it happened.
It's
But I
okay.
think, okay.
It's okay. The one thing I want you to be very clear is that if you do not get satisfaction, please come to the board so that we can work on the situation. If we don't know it, we aren't here to do manager day-to-day work. We're here to do policy. And the thing of it is, if it comes to the board and there might be an issue with staff or whatever, then we can talk to the director about it. But we need to be aware of it. And I just want to be very open to you that the commission, the housing commission that you have appointed, is very much for that. We want to make things right, and we want to clear up any misunderstanding. With Doug not being here, I don't know if I gave you all the information you asked for, but we do have one other thing I'd like to bring up.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. It has been brought to our attention, the board, regarding a request for the LEAP. Let me just say this. We were approached we were requested to partner with, or to allow, let me think how I'm going to say this. Okay, we were approached to request, it was requested of us to participate in the LEAP program on behalf of our residents. And the board took 2 votes on that and said no. And the reason they said no was because we get subsidy from the federal government for utilities for those people who live in buildings that have utilities provided for them. Okay. LEAP is willing to give the housing authority money for tenants who have utilities provided for them, 1/3 of their income for rent, 2/3 for rent, 1/3 for utilities. In order for them to get more food stamps or to work with the food stamp program. The county commission felt that was double dipping. We felt that we were already subsidized for the utilities from the federal government through subsidies, and we shouldn't be taking money from LEAP for the utilities that the tenants do not pay directly to the utility company. We understand it's necessary to partner with a lot of people in order to help the people in our areas. We understand that. And because we've had very strong advocacy to do this, I'm going to recommend to the board that we accept the request of participating with the LEAP to benefit the residents. I don't think we're talking about a whole lot of money, but it will impact SNAP, the food stamp program, by 430 people if they all apply. And it will also impact energy assistance. Just want you to know that we're the only housing authority that said no to this. The rest of the housing authorities in the state do accept this program. So on the benefit of our residents, I'm going to recommend that we reconsider this situation. There is strong advocacy for it, and I know it will help residents, and we are about helping residents, even though rules and regulations come into play that we can't always take care of. But just so you know, because it was brought forth to us, and we are going to, I will ask for reconsideration. Is there any
Madam
other?
Chair,
Commissioner Roskinek.
if I get my information right, other counties that accept layup payments are Custer, Fall River, Butte, Lawrence, Meade, Hughes, Brown, and Minnehaha, just of a few. So if Pennington County was to go that route, we wouldn't be out there by ourselves.
Right, right. All of them in the state do accept it. I with Meade County was resistant before and fought it with SNAP before. And HUD says it doesn't matter to them what we do because it's a state issue. LEAP says that we can do either or. And SNAP program, their director did not contact us, but their one of their staff members said that's just their rule. So until we can find something different that's more concrete, then we're going to go with the majority. At least I'm going to recommend we go with the majority and accept this.
Appreciate that. Your next meeting is tomorrow at 4 o'clock?
Yes, it's tomorrow at 4 o'clock, and Doug will not be there again, but we're going to go ahead with our agenda.
Okay, thank you.
And you're invited to come anytime. And I will stay for questions and responses.
Thank you, Ms. Sherry. Ron and I were at the last meeting in full disclosure, asking with Barry Tice on the ELAP. We appreciate the reconsideration because, like Barry said, at first it probably will be a little bit of an issue trying to get that going. But once you get that paperwork down, like most programs, it becomes a lot more simplified. So we appreciate that reconsideration, Ms. Sherry.
I'll take it before the board today or tomorrow.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
We do have Chuck Henry for number one.
Number one.
Or your number one speaker.
Okay. I am a person that's on the waiting list for public housing, and I've moved up pretty quick on it. I'm at 12 now, so usually when I fall back a little bit, it jumps ahead a lot. It's worth it. Right now I'm on Section 8. I was considered homeless when I was staying in a motel, so I got on a voucher for homeless really quick to get into it and end up with Section 8 on that. And now I'm going to public housing, and it's a worthwhile group. I just thank the Pennington County Housing for their programs they have.
Thank you. Next, we have Carol Boland.
Morning.
Good morning, ma'am.
My name is Carol Boland. I am a resident of Hampton Court. I'm here representing a few of the other residents. We figured we'd just kind of pick one spokesperson to explain some of our concerns. I first want to tell you thank you. I want to extend a personal thank you to Ron for your assistance recently. My husband and I have lived on Hampton Court since 1998. And when we purchased the house, had absolutely no idea that there was 2 Pennington County homes at the end of our cul-de-sac. Honestly, up until about 7 years ago, it made no issue. Our only concern with living on that street, basically with any neighbor, is you just want respectful, law-abiding neighbors. In the past 6 or 7 years, we've started to have some issues with various tenants that have come in, not all of them. One of them was a family. We have, my husband and I have 2 daughters. They're almost 20 and 16 now. So, we've raised them there. And when they were younger, we had a resident that had some children that were not respectful, that bullied our daughters, that we had issues with. I went down and spoke with the father, and we worked out the issues right there. I just told him, we all have to live on this street. We need to be respectful to each other, and it was resolved. They did their thing, we did our thing, no big deal. The residents that currently live in one of the properties we've had some major concerns with. And a lot of the issues, Ron can attest, we have put on paper in an email. They have been forwarded. I know, Deb, you have been receiving, and nice to meet you finally. A lot of these issues, I'm sorry, was it Sharon? Sherry, okay. A lot of the issues were brought to Doug's attention recently. So I just want to clarify that. Our big thing, aside from, we've got some very serious things going on now because one of the residents has basically brought this into legal. I mean, it's a false, frivolous thing. She, put a protection order against my husband, who's only actually spoken to her twice in the 2 years that she's lived there. And what she put in there is just frivolous, but it's going to cost us $2,500 at minimum to fight this, for us to have representation there. So aside from those personal issues, which I hope we can get resolved quickly, our concern is with Pennington County and the program as a whole, and how we've got some questions on how it's managed. I know, Sherry, you mentioned that some of the public housings are monitored and inspected. And I would have to ask, like when that's done, because we had to call code enforcement in June, and this is all documented as well, because their grass was 2 feet tall. And the house is right next to a drainage ditch. It attracts snakes like crazy.
Miss Carol, she can hear you this way, honey.
Okay, I just feel like I have to meet eye to eye when I'm talking with somebody, so I apologize. First time doing anything like this.
Can
So-
I ask you, now that we know, is there a landlord and this is South Dakota Housing with HUD, or is it, because what she just explained to me is the same thing I think that's going on.
Right.
Do you have a landlord there that is monitoring?
I do not believe so. I have gone on to the Pennington County Equalization where you can put in a property, and the listed owner is Pennington County Housing.
Okay.
I'm going to assume that means that they're the property owner. So in the past, when we've had concerns, and it's not just myself, it's some of the other neighbors, there's 3 houses that have all made complaints have called to Pennington County Housing or have sent emails. And the property manager for our facilities, the properties that are on our street, the answers you get are, call the police. It's out of my hands. Call the police. It's out of my hands. Well, some things you can't necessarily call the police. I'm not going to call the police for every little thing, but we've got some concerns. When you've got houses now, the screens are hanging off, and you've got, fighting, and, the police do get called. It doesn't do any good. The people won't answer the door as soon as the police show up. We are aware, it's all public knowledge, that one of the residents that's listed, and I don't know exactly who rents these houses. That's just it. It's like there is so much traffic in and out there. There's so many people in and out. I have no idea who lives there.
Ms. Carol, can I interrupt you just for a second?
Absolutely.
Have you went to any of the meetings of the South Dakota Housing Board?
We were planning to go tomorrow. Actually, we just found about this meeting on like Friday or Saturday. So we are here. I mean, this is
Thank you.
definitely important to us. So we're trying to take as many proper actions as we can.
And I'm not discounting what you're saying, but I also listened to Ms. Sherry on some of her areas where I did not know some of that information as landlord. Also, the meetings are very helpful because they do listen. And then I think we as a board, we pick that board in a sense, but they are the ones that are going to make that difference in the bottom line.
Sure.
So that's what I had told Ryan when the meetings were. I sent him the schedule because Ryan Harris has the same questions you were having over in the Sheridan Lake area. So I think it's not necessarily we're taking our own districts to do this. We're just people who contact us and want to visit with us kind of thing. I recommended him going to Sherry and their board as well. And if I needed to go there to listen and see what some of those answers were, then that would probably be where we're going from there.
I agree. Yeah, we have cleared our schedules to attend tomorrow as well.
So maybe we can find some solution there with the board and some of the issues that you're having in that area, and
Agreed.
also clear up maybe if it's a landlord, that's the issue, or Pennington County can actually, their housing units, if they do own them, maybe they can help you out at that point as well.
Sure.
Madam
Okay.
Chair.
Because we are listening.
We appreciate that, yeah.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner LaCroy.
Thank you for your comments, Deb. And Carol, I appreciate it. We used to live next door to each other, so I know how that neighborhood was 15 years ago.
Yeah,
And,
it was quiet.
you know, I think we knew there was South Dakota housing down there back then, but we didn't have the problems. But I just wanted to express, thank you guys for taking the time out of your day to come here and present to Sherry. I think we all learned a little bit of something, but I think one of the things I'd express the most is, you know, when I talked to Kelly, I need more details. With me and him until Saturday, I didn't know everything that was happening, and I wish I would have been more aware. I could have moved forward a little bit more. I thought you guys were just concerned with looking for who's responsible for what, and that's where I was.
Yeah.
But I think you guys are doing the right steps. You're coming here, you in a public forum, and you're expressing your concerns, and we see that. And going to the meeting tomorrow, to the board meeting, find that out and expressing it to the board, I think it's going to speak volumes. And I really, you know, I apologize that you guys have to take such time out of your day to do this, but it just shows your commitment to the community and your neighborhood, that it means this much to you. And I appreciate you guys taking your time to come here and express that to us.
I will be there tomorrow at 4.
Appreciate that.
And I plan on being there as well.
Good. Well, we do appreciate your support and your help, because honestly, in the years that we've been contacting the housing, we weren't getting anywhere until Kelly contacted you, and finally we're getting at least some action.
That's my job.
Well, maybe
It's
we
been very
can,
frustrating.
what we've tried to do is find solution.
Exactly, and that's all we were
and-
looking for. I mean, was, you know, who do we go to? We've gone to the housing and it didn't work, so somebody's not listening, so.
Some of that is kind of misinformation on my part as well, so I'm going to admit that I didn't know all of that Miss Sherry was saying. So
absolutely,
knowing that, I think it's easier how we move forward or what comes next as well for us. How about that?
Yeah.
So
There's a lot of things that we don't know about public housing as well. I mean, I have nothing against it. I think it's great for those that need that hand forward to get, you know, like you said, to move up and, you know, get on the right track. I think it's a great service for many people, but they also need to be respectful and law abiding. And
I appreciate that. I have some South Dakota housing houses, and we have people that we have to go looking on, and we have to make sure they're doing the right thing and keeping the neighborhood, you know, respectful. Sometimes I've seen neighbors, it goes the other way. They don't want those kind of people in their neighborhood, and they're not respectful. So I see both sides of that.
Sure.
But bottom line is, let's go to that meeting tomorrow and see if we can find solution with Miss Sherry and the board, and they can explain what's going on, or maybe about their houses and stuff tomorrow, and find you some solution.
that would be appreciated.
Thank you,
All right.
Annie.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Anybody else
Carol.
need to speak on number 15? And everybody understands the meeting tomorrow? And where that's at, that address. Miss Sherry, can you tell the folks in the audience when that meeting is and what time that starts?
The board meeting will be at Jackson Heights High Rise, 1805 West Jackson Boulevard at 4 o'clock on the 4th floor.
Thank you,
Fourth or third?
4th floor.
Okay.
Thank you. Miss Sherry, did you have any follow-up?
Just to follow up, I look at my information, and Hampton Court is in our public housing,
Okay.
and I will try to get the information from the staff as to what's taken place there, and try to be prepared for tomorrow, as again, Doug won't be there, so I will try to do my very best.
Thank you, Miss Sherry, for your time today. Thank you. Next, we'll have item 16, items from the auditor. Thank you, Miss Cindy.
Good morning, Commissioners. Cindy Moeller, Pennington County Auditor. The first item that we have on the agenda is Supplement 19-18, which is to supplement the MacArthur Fund State's Attorney's Office budget in the amount of $71,705, and the Sheriff's Office budget within the MacArthur Fund in the amount of $316,980 from restricted fund balance.
We'll do motion 1 first. Do we have a motion or discussion?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner DeSanto.
I'd just like to know what the funds are going to be spent on.
I would have to defer to
Brian
either
Mueller.
the state's attorney or the sheriff's office for the exact use of that.
Good morning, Brian Mueller, Pennington County Sheriff's Office.
Commissioner DeSanto, ask.
Yes, the fund, what will the funds, the 388,000, what are those going to be going towards? I know MacArthur has specific things that we can spend that money on. What is it going to be?
Correct. A lot of the Sheriff's Office funds, we got a late start with the grant, so some of these funds were available still, and we're in the reapplication process for next year, so we needed to spend the grant money down. So we submitted a request to MacArthur to utilize some of these funds on existing staff that we have and staff that we're hiring to help get the residential treatment beds up and running over at the care campus. So a majority of the money on the Sheriff's Office side is going towards that venture, also paying for some travel and training and some new programs that we're doing with 24/7, but a majority of it is staffing at the care campus. And I don't know exactly what the funds on the state's attorney's office side were going towards, but I do believe it was some staffing also and some training travel.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify, a lot of money that we're authorizing moving around and no explanation of where it's going, so.
Correct.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Thanks,
And
Brian.
This would be the public hearing part?
Yep.
Motion?
Motion to open public hearing?
Second.
Okay.
This is actually the public hearing?
Yes, this is the
Yes,
public
this
hearing.
is to actually approve the supplement.
Yes.
Oh.
So, motion to approve, LaCroy? Commissioner?
Move.
Thank you. Just Ross Connect, it was your second?
Second.
You understanding that's to approve this amount? Yes, okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, motion carries. And the second motion, please. A motion or discussion? Or is that both?
There was just one motion that needed to be made,
Right.
Madam Chair.
Okay, so you open it, we didn't need a motion to open public hearing and then close it, and then motion to approve the supplement? So the first one was, you were right, Commissioner LaCroy, was to open public hearing, was LaCroy, second by Ross
Seconded.
Connect, and then all in favor was
Then-
aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Yep.
and then this one, motion needs to approve the
Close.
supplement.
Do we need to close public comment?
Sure.
Motion to approve.
Motion to close.
Close public
Close the-
comment.
Second.
Ross Connect, second by DeSanto. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, motion carries.
Move to approve.
Okay, next is to move to the budget supplement, MacArthur grant of $71,705, approved by LaCroy. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ross Connect. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Did we do that right, Holly?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
You're doing the
It's just something new for
71,000
us,
and
folks.
And
you're
the
doing both. You
388.
just said 71,000, but you're doing the 316,982?
Yes, the
Okay.
open public hearing was LaCroy and Ross
Right,
Connect.
I was talking about your
Closed.
last
Okay.
motion on the amounts.
Yes, yep.
Okay.
71, yep. Thank you, Ms. Carey. You got all those motions?
Got 'em.
Okay. IRS audit, Ms. Cindy.
Yeah, the next item that I do have on the agenda is the summary of the employment tax examination and the fact that the IRS has assessed us penalties in the amount of $87,140.63. And I'm asking authorization to pay those penalties. I have asked for an abatement for the 2016 amount, which was $28,022.67. I have not heard back from them if they will grant that or not. If I have authorization to pay the full amount, obviously if it's less, I will not be paying that full amount, and I will let you know that when I hear from the examiner.
Thank you.
Having had previous experience with IRS on those type of issues, I wouldn't expect any quick response.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner DeSanto.
Just some clarification, Cindy. If I'm reading this or understanding this correctly, we paid the tax, but we didn't pay it for a short period of time between the draw and the actual recording of payroll, correct?
That is correct.
Which is a period of, what, 14 to 15 days?
15, 16, yeah, yes.
And yet we can still be fined? Is that like a late payment penalty?
It's for non-payment and also for paying it late. Because we didn't tax the draw the way we should have, which would have resulted in the payment being made on the 15th or thereabouts.
But we taxed it on the 30th.
We did, but therefore we were late in remitting those taxes because we should have been doing it on the mid-month draw.
Boy, IRS is getting pretty tight.
Good auditors.
Madam Chair, are you done?
I'm done.
Sure.
Commissioner Drews.
The crux of it is that all the taxes were paid by Pennington County.
Right.
IRS doesn't see that it was done in a timely fashion since we did that draw for the middle of the month payment. And so consequently, this is the first time the IRS has been in here for at least years, maybe first time ever, I don't know.
Yep.
And so they find that as a fault and consequently applied the penalty to Pennington County.
So Cindy started a first year of having to take care of the issues that happened before. She's having a heck of a time.
Right.
And she's doing a great job moving us forward. So we appreciate that, some of these findings and some of the things that she's inherited.
Well, and follow up, Madam Chair, we've made a change in our payroll system, so this will never happen again.
We are working towards that end, yes.
Gotcha.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner.
I'll just make this comment because I believe I was employed with the county back in the late 80s, and it seems like I remember this going to the monthly and some of the discussions on that. And I think the county is kind of getting penalized for helping the employees out in my book, because taking that draw, giving them that option to take that draw out in the middle of the month was helping them pay the bills that come up in the middle and so forth. And that was one of the original things. I know you said this was 30 years ago, so I'm old, but I think that was the original intent of doing the draws was for that. And I guess I'm just a little disappointed in our own state audits that they come by and do it every year and they didn't catch it either. So it's kind of a no-win situation for us. But the bottom line is we got the penalty and we got to own up to it. And I think we're going to. But the intentions of what happened were all in good faith. And it was not deliberate intentions. So we still got to pay the price.
And I agree with you, Lloyd. I truly believe it was to help the employees and not to do it to be facetious.
Yeah. So I'd make the motion to approve the amount of $87,140.63 for the penalties assessed as a result of the audit, IRS audit.
Moved by LaCroix, second by Drews. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries.
Thank you,
Ms. Cindy,
Commissioners.
for everything you do for us. Item 17. He's got a helper? Search and rescue vehicle authorization to purchase.
Good morning, Brian Mueller again, Pennington County Sheriff's Office. Uh-oh, we broke the computer. We're going to talk about technical assistance here.
Jones, your technician. Turning red.
I have with me this morning Sean Gabb. He's a local business owner and one of our team leaders for search and rescue. He's going to be helping me with the presentation. And I just want to take a moment of liberty, if I may. In the crowd, we have Ray Codwell, one of our search and rescue volunteers. He's been a volunteer for Pennington County Search and Rescue for 44 years.
Thank you,
Let
sir.
that sink in for a minute. That's pretty awesome. We have a lot of dedicated volunteers that work throughout Pennington County, as you know, and In particular, our search and rescue volunteers have been heavily taxed this year with the searches that we've had going on. So we really, really appreciate all the time that they put in, including the time that they've spent down here today waiting for our agenda item, which we appreciate. Just a little bit of introduction. I know that the sheriff had written you a letter that kind of outlined our request that we're going to be making today to use the sole source exception to purchase the SHIRT Pro. Just a little bit of background on that. For the last couple of years, we've known that we've needed to replace one of our specialty pieces of equipment. We have some older snowcats. We initially thought that would probably be the direction that we'd be going to try to replace one of them. We also have mat tracks and several other specialty vehicles. So a couple of years ago, we were fortunate enough to work with the commission to start a equipment reserve in anticipation to try to save a little bit of money each year until we had enough in this reserve to buy a specialty piece of equipment. And Sean headed up a committee earlier this year to do some research to figure out exactly what type of vehicle that we should be trying to research and purchase. And I'm going to let him give you just a little bit of a background into the capabilities of the SHIRT Pro. And then if we may, we have a couple of minute video we'd like to show you so you can get a sense as to what type of vehicle it is. I'll turn it over to Sean.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Sean Gabb, team leader for Pennington County Search and Rescue. And as Ryan said, we put a committee together and did a lot of research to come up with the selection of this particular vehicle. And if you do watch the video here, you'll notice the reasons for its uniqueness. It does a lot of things that other vehicles just can't do. And one of the things that's always on our mind when we're doing a rescue is the safety of our rescuers, as well as the victims that we may be rescuing. And you'll see in the video that it not only navigates terrain that other vehicles simply can't, but it does it in a safe and controlled manner as well. So you can put the victims in the vehicle and they're still safe. It's quite a machine. And another thing to note is that anytime we send a special vehicle out on a mission or a rescue, we try to send multiple of them, because if the conditions are such that we need that vehicle now in that area, if anything happens, it is, after all, still a mechanical vehicle. And if something breaks or does get stuck, to have another vehicle with similar capabilities is quite important, of course. So moving forward, we would be looking for raising funds actually outside not in this room really, but from the public, for an additional unit as well. So as you watch the video, are we okay watching a couple minute video?
Yes.
Okay. As you watch that, just put yourself in a typical vehicle, and you'll realize that what you're heading into and over and through just can't be done in any other vehicle. So with that, I think I will start the video, and then we'll stand for questions afterwards, of course.
Thank you, Sean and Brian.
You want sound or not sound?
Can you get me one too?
Yeah. So these tires, I'll just talk through the video here if you don't mind. The tires are 5 feet tall.
Oh.
They're incredibly large. That was the inside of it. I did pass out a chart. It's in your pamphlet, you probably noticed, showing the capabilities of our other equipment. And snowcats, of course, are great in the snow, but nothing else. And the capabilities of the SHIRP actually go far into the capabilities of the snowcats as well.
Wow.
Which is interesting. Yeah, that's waist deep snow. And on that capabilities chart, you'll see that there are areas like the water and the ice that our current capability just doesn't allow. That video shows thin ice driven over by this vehicle because it's so light. And if it does break through the ice, it floats. But not only that, it can actually get itself out of the water back up onto the ice, which no other vehicle in the world can do. So it can do all of that with your patient load. So one of the missions we have is to support the Rapid City and Pennington County Water Rescue Team, and the ability of this to help in ways that currently there's nothing to help them. Yeah, this demonstrates the stability even in rushing water. So the water rescue team is also excited about the capability that we can offer to them as a standard call support. Again, you take any of the vehicles that are custom or things that we have right now, and they just won't go through this. You have to find another route. And some of the things in the video here are demonstrating the capabilities, not necessarily that every rescue we go on will be like this, but it is very comforting to know that if it is, we can actually get through it.
The tires, Sean, did tires deflate or what do they do?
Yeah, so it's actually controlled from the
inside?
cockpit.
Yeah.
You can deflate it and inflate it, and they share the same air system between all four tires, so that's also your suspension.
How much is one of those tires?
How much is a tire? Approximately $3,000.
Thank you.
So what's the power plant in that?
It's a Kubota engine. It's used in tractors all around the world.
Diesel?
Diesel, turbo diesel, 44 horsepower. Yep.
Wow.
It is not a speed demon, but it goes over terrain that allows you to get to the people that you need to. Here this was a demo with our search and rescue team. We met the SHRP folks at Chamberlain so that we could see what its capabilities were firsthand. And we put 10 people into the SHRP and then drove it off into the Missouri River, paddled around, did what we needed, and came back. And we could have put a couple more in, but we didn't have any more. That's all we could take over there. So it's very capable.
Wow.
And there's just nothing else like it out there. So.
And Brian, it's replacing, we were saving money for something else, another vehicle. Can you explain that? And that we're going to get this vehicle if we can instead?
Correct. We do have 3 older snowcats. What we were looking at potentially when we first started with this reserve was likely replacing one of those vehicles. They're still functional, but through our committee and the research that they did, we figured out this vehicle is much more capable than a snowcat. So it wouldn't be actually replacing a vehicle. Probably when we pick this up, we could look at potentially retiring one of the older snowcats. But that would be our intention.
Thank you. Questions or
Madam Chair.
motion?
Yeah, I went on the website. I think they sell those in Bemidji.
Correct.
Minnesota. If we buy one of those, and who does the repairs on it? I'm assuming it's pretty unique. So is there a place that, and it's an emergency vehicle, do we got a contingency plan for spare tires, spare parts, and service?
Yeah, so you brought up Bemidji. That's actually the first and largest U.S. distributor. And we are in their area. We have to buy through them. And they service their area with a mobile service unit. And interestingly, they've come by 3 times in the last month because they service clear out to Montana and Wyoming. And they not only service, but they do demos and deliveries as well. So they're back and forth through Rapid City very often. And in addition to that, they're looking at setting up a small facility in the hills because it's kind of central to this western portion of their territory.
Nice.
Other comment was good choice on the bilge pump for $299.
Right?
Yeah.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner?
Brian, this was also, like you said, we've got an aging fleet of snowcats. The snowcats are sort of limited. Well, they are limited in what they can do. And so what would have been the price of a new snowcat if we were to replace one of those snowcats?
The snowcats, for a good used one, you're looking at probably around $200,000.
Okay.
And for a new one, I think they're in that $350,000 to $400,000 range.
And the SHRP is running $121,000.
Correct.
Wow.
That's another good reason to look this direction.
And that's what we thought. A lot of times when you find that new technology, it comes with a much higher price tag.
Right.
So to find something that suited our needs and was even more affordable, I think is a win-win.
Well, and not only the more affordable, but the versatility of it far surpasses a snowcat.
Correct.
You can't drive a snowcat on a lake.
You cannot.
Not unless
Only once.
Not unless you want to
If you do, we'll be
retrieve
coming,
it later.
be coming to
I
rescue
was gonna
you.
say, you're gonna get rescued.
Yeah.
Commissioner LaCroy?
I'd move to authorize the sheriff's office to order the new SHRP Pro rollover protection system with accessories and training for a total of $121,217.
Second.
Moved by LaCroy, second by DeSanto. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
I'd make another motion to schedule a hearing for Tuesday, November 5th, 2019 at 9:15 to supplement the general fund search and rescue budget in the amount of $121,217 for the assigned search and rescue equipment reserves.
Second.
Motion by LaCroy, second by Drews. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to ask for a 5-minute break. Is that okay with you?
No, Joe, you can't have one of these.
Moved by LaCroy, second by DeSanto. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. You guys ready?
Oh, that's your job.
Ms.
Okay,
Janet,
so for now. Okay, thank you.
number 18.
Here she comes. Hi, Miss Janet.
Good morning, Janet Saylor, Treasurer. I sent a memo to the commissioners in reference to the uncollectible mobile homes, and I attached the law 102230. The uncollectible mobile homes are given to the sheriff in January of every year, and the sheriff goes out and collects them. There was $155,000 worth of mobile home taxes that were due. $16,000 of that is sheriff fees. And the total amount of the uncollectible mobile homes was $1,261.17. And of these, there's 9 mobile home warrants that are being returned to us as uncollectible. I have listed all those for you and why they have deemed them uncollectible. So I need the commission to, if you don't have any questions, I need you to deem these mobile homes uncollectible so that we can stop sending notices on them because they no longer exist.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Roskinick, second by Drews. Any discussion?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner LaCroy.
just want to thank the Sheriff's Department for the amount of collection that they did get done, because that's an awful lot of work, 593 warrants.
It is, and our sheriff's office does a fantastic job when it comes to collecting mobile home taxes on distress warrants.
I just didn't know there was that many. A total of 593 warrants were paid for a total of $155,121, which includes $16,411.58 in sheriff's fee. The total amount of taxes for the uncollectible mobile homes is $1,261.
And 17 cents, that's correct.
You do a wonderful job. Thank you, Ms. Janet.
Thank you.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, motion carries. Item 19, please. Looks like we got a replacement. Good morning, Alexis.
Morning, Alexa White with Pennington County Emergency Management. Dustin had a call he was on, so he couldn't get away. I just wanted to talk to you about our work plan. This is one of the requirements that we have annually to get our LEMPG funding. And we come to you each quarter and talk about what we've done and the things that are required as part of this plan. One of those things in this plan is to come to you and tell you about any changes that we have each year. And really, there aren't any changes as far as the actual requirements. They just change how the form looks and how we need to fill it out. So this year, there isn't any new changes, just kind of what we did last year.
Thank you. Any questions for Alexis?
No.
No. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Lex.
Thanks for all you do, Miss Alexis, for us. Item number 20. Gordon? Shannon's not here. He's actually serving our community on a search and rescue mission. So
Madam
we
Chair.
thank him for that. Commissioner Roskinick.
On this particular issue, I was involved with the appraisal of said property. I was hired by a bank in Sioux Falls to do the appraisal. During that process, we caught the error in the land size, and the owner of the property has hired our firm to, we just helped him do some abatement for him, so I'm going to abstain from this vote.
Thank you. Gordon?
Okay, Gordon Wendell, Pennington County Equalization. The abatement for you was, I guess in a nutshell, due to an error in the acreage calculation on the property. So we are recommending an abatement on this property in the amount of $6,790.44.
Have a motion or discussion?
Move for approval.
Motion by LaCroy, second by Drews. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Gordon.
And just FYI, Shannon's out on horseback doing a search and rescue, so
I had told
he's
somebody.
making good use of his cowboy hat.
And boots.
I told somebody he was gonna be riding his horse through the hills. Thank you for, Shannon.
See, Madam
I know
Chair?
he's not here, but go ahead.
Regarding that abatement, I want to thank the Attorney's Office and Director of Equalization for doing the research, because these aren't always cut and dry, and there had to be some research in this, and I appreciate you guys taking the time to do that.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Good morning, or at least I think it's still morning. Joe Miller, Pennington County Highway Department. Before you is a ordinance amendment to Ordinance 32 for the placement of snow in the right-of-way. This was last revised in 1995. Back then it had a maximum fine of $50 with the cost of the snow removal billed to the offender at $60 an hour if we had to go out there and remove that. We felt with the ordinance being over 24 or 20 years old, it'd be wise to look into it and make sure it was still enforceable. From our office last year, we had, numerous complaints that we had to go check out and, verbally inform the offenders, I guess, that you can't do that, and there is a fine that could go along with it. We only had one incident last year that could have resulted in a fine, I guess, repeat offender. I'm talking with Mark in the office. This has never been enforced, or a fine has never been given, but it's a good tool to have in the toolbox to alleviate, people from depositing their snow in the right of way and keep our traveling public safe. It can cause a safety hazard if somebody puts their snow or ice chunks right in the middle of the roadway and another car comes and hits it and causes an accident, both property and, I guess, personal injury. It's been reviewed by the state's attorney, so I'd like to thank Michelle and Tracy on that, with all the legal updates. The offenders, like I said earlier, they'll verbally be informed first that they can't do that, and then go from there. If repeat offenders, we'll turn that over to the state's attorney's office, and they'll follow the correct procedures. They're working with Judge Fifley and the sheriff's office to work on enforcement there. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. First, we need a motion to open the public
So
hearing.
move.
Moved by Drews,
Second?
second by DeSanto. Is there anybody in the public that we're missing that would like to speak on this issue? Not? Go ahead, board. Make a motion to close the public
Make a
hearing.
motion to close the public hearing.
Second?
Motion by Drews, second by DeSanto. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Next, questions on, move to approve the first reading of ordinance number 32-1.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner DeSanto.
Joe, just to give an example of this would be like, for example, a neighborhood, private neighborhood that plows their own snow off of Sheridan Lake Road, pushing their own snow out into the middle of Sheridan Lake Road.
Correct.
Just so that I can give a simplification of an explanation of what we're talking about here. So,
Yes.
okay.
So Joe, you're going from, what's the fine?
So talking to Michelle, there's I don't remember the terminology, but the maximum fine is $500 or 30 days in jail. I think it's a class 2 misdemeanor. I don't know, class 2 misdemeanor. Jay's here, so that's just the maximum fine. Not saying that that's what the fine would be, but that's what a judge could rule.
So just a question, Joe. You didn't have any violations of this. Why would you change it?
So last year we would have had one incident where we would have liked to, I guess, enforce this, but talking with Mark in the office, it's never been done, so we weren't sure as far as if we had the ability to do that from our office.
So let me ask you the obvious question. If you just had to do it once, Are you willing to change a whole ordinance over once? Because it might be happening more and you might be using this tool in the toolbox more.
So that it was one incident, verbally, we tell people many times that it is against the county ordinance. And they stopped doing it. Since I've been there, I've been here almost a year, and it happened, where one time we would have used this, but verbally our foreman and, Mark and myself have told people that, hey, you can't pile snow, and we've even sent letters to people to inform them.
But maybe if you put more teeth to an ordinance, you'd have less of it or less time going out into other areas you probably should have, but you didn't. And they probably thought there wasn't a big enough fine maybe or something that they're gonna do it and go ahead. You'll save us that $60 or whatever. It's not gonna.
Yeah. Correct.
Cheaper for you to do it than it is me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner LaCroy.
Thanks for your comments, Deb, because I think that's right on. I think at the $60 mark, I think the county employees go, is it worth my time to do this? And even though it's reoccurring, maybe it's every other year, but it's the same property owner, by redoing this ordinance and be able to send that out with a little more teeth in it, may get better results to where it's not happening so often. Just my thoughts, but I'm in support of the new ordinance.
Okay. Any discussion or motion?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Drews.
I make a motion to approve the first reading of ordinance 32-1, an ordinance to amend ordinance 32 prohibiting placement of snow onto a highway or public right-of-way and increasing the penalty.
Second.
Moved by Drews, second by DeSanto. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Next, we have Board of Adjustment.
Move to go into Board of Adjustments.
Moved by LaCroy,
Second.
second by DeSanto. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Just a reiteration of speaker request forms. If you plan on speaking on any of these items, 22, 23, how about 22? Please fill out a speaker request form and hand it to Miss Holly at the left of the dais. Thank you. PJ, you're up. Cassie.
Maybe Cassie, ma'am.
Good morning, Cassie Bolstead. The only item that you have before you today for the Board of Adjustment is variance 1904. This is a request to reduce the front yard setback from 5 feet to 0 feet for an on-premise sign in a highway service district. The applicant was Keystone Adventures, Inc., Andrew Bussey. This has been before you and continued several times. The last time it was before you was at the September 20th board meeting. I had a conversation with Andrew Bussey on the 9th of October. He has stated that the DOT is going to be selling him additional property, so this variance is actually no longer going to be necessary. So he has requested that we withdraw variance 1904, so that is staff's recommendation.
So moved.
Motion by DeSanto to withdraw.
Second.
Second by Drews. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Thank you for your work, Miss Cassie.
Move to close Board of Adjustment.
Moved by
Second.
LaCroy, second by DeSanto to close Board of Adjustment. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Item B.
PJ Conover, Director, Planning Department. What you're being handed out now is an item, some road construction plans in the section line that will be discussed by a representative for, I believe, Mr. Henderson later. What you have before you is variance 1904, which is request to reduce, oh, sorry, my bad. Let me change that. Vacation of section line, VS 1902. To vacate the section line right-of-way is on Lot 2 of Lot B of Lot 4 of Iowa Placer MS number 636. This was before you prior and was continued so that more research can be done. What was of main concern to one of the speakers was access to his property. What staff has determined, if you remember, the property to the north is owned by the Hendersons. From what we can determine, we still can't 100% definitively determine that the applicant has access to his property. As of this morning, we're reached out to DOT again, to Rich Zocker, to get a reconfirmation on some statements that he had made that there was and would always be, well, not always be, but would Mr. Henderson would always be allowed access off of 385. The property line appears to, let me show you here. In this drawing here, you can see where the estimated property line is based on staff's research. And the 2 points here that are outlined in yellow are 2 posts that Mr. Henderson has on his property. Those 2 posts lead down a embankment and go through a gate onto the subject property that he owns. As you can see here, the 2 posts are there, and there appears to be a 2-track trail, or at least some damage to the vegetation as it had been recently used. The other question that had come up about this property is the access to the other portion of Mr. Henderson's property across the Mickelson Trail. With the question of access off of 385 still attempting to be determined, we have also learned that Mr. Henderson also owns the abutting property to the north and has access off of 385 for residential purposes, which were given to him by Game and Fish to access the residence. And that is also one of the ways that they access down the Mickelson Trail for agricultural purposes to the bigger property in question. So as you can see, the properties that are outlined in yellow are properties owned by Mr. Henderson at this time. I met with a representative from Game and Fish, the manager from the Mickelson Trail, who assured me that Mr. Henderson does have access across the Mickelson Trail for agricultural purposes, and if requested, would also receive access for residential purposes across the Mickelson Trail. With that, we still firmly believe that Mr. Henderson has access to his property, either off of 385 or from his property abutting to the north, and then also based on Game, Fish, and Parks comments that they would allow residential access across the Mickelson Trail. And with that, staff would still recommend approval of the vacation of section line VS 1902 by resolution with same 2 conditions.
Thank you, PJ.
You're welcome.
Any questions for PJ?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Roskinek.
PJ, the access that you're talking about right now, is that for, would that be, if they decided to do a residential subdivision hypothetically, would that access be adequate enough for a subdivision? Or is it for agriculture?
So right now they have access for agricultural purposes. And there's different ways that they can access, and I don't know why this isn't writing on here, it usually is, but they can access from the north down to Mickelson or come off of 385 across the smaller property and across the creek and then through the gate that has existed there. And there are tracks, if you look through the old photos, it doesn't really show, but there's a gate a little bit further here north, but you can see through the years how they've been accessing down the road. This is 2011, 2002, and especially in 1998, which is about a little few years after 385 was improved.
I guess my question was, I know they can get to that piece off of 385. Can they get a permit from the state to go across that 100-foot right-of-way where the trail is to put a residential subdivision on the east side?
She didn't use the word subdivision. She said she would allow residential access. That would be the preferred route, to go across that 100-foot access. There are also instances of people taking residential access down the Mickelson Trail for much further than just perpendicular and running down the trail for almost 3/4 of a mile in some instances. And Dana, the manager for the Mickelson Trail, she stated that because of the extent of the Mickelson Trail and how it snakes through everything, they work with residents to accommodate their needs within reason. There's nobody that's driving down it for 10 miles, but when they can, they try to they would prefer the least impactful access, which would be the one off of 385 across the small property, not necessarily down from the current residence where he lives in.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Do you want to hear from the applicant first?
There are a number of speakers that are here today. It's up to you, whoever.
Okay, let's do the applicant first. And then if they need to come back on or you have questions for them. Come on up, sir, and your name, sir?
Good morning, Dan Detweiler.
Okay.
Still want this up? Yes. Okay.
This has taken a lot of your time, and I apologize, and I appreciate the fact that it has taken a lot of your time. So appreciate you hearing the rest of the details and having us, providing us the opportunity to address your questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Ditweiler? Any questions for Mr. Ditweiler on this issue? Do you have anything to say to us, sir? It doesn't sound like we have questions.
Well, yes, I do. And I've written extensively about this, but I decided it wouldn't be a good use of your time to read all my thoughts on this matter. So I just narrowed it down to about 8 or 9 bullet points that I'd like to share with you.
Okay.
And I've come back, answer any questions you have, and follow up with any questions that are developed either from my testimony or from the Hendersons.
Yes, sir.
I do have a question. Maybe PJ has the answer, maybe not, but I'm curious how large this overall property is. It appears to be hundreds of acres. Now for my bullet points. We have received communication from the Department of Transportation's engineer indicating that they would not be interested in granting a new drive access at either the location of the section line off of Highway 385 or the location of the proposed easement that John Henderson and I have discussed on the phone since the last meeting. There was issues with my minimum site distance, primarily driveway spacing was going to become a big issue. The section line across our property has never been utilized for access to the Henderson property. The section line, if it were developed into an elevated roadway, would end up having guardrails. It would create enormous drainage and flooding issues on our property. It would completely devastate the north 2 acres of our property. The elevation of the roadway itself would be approximately 10 feet higher than the roofs of our adjacent buildings there, to kind of put it in perspective. I see some engineers have done some work here, and their work will more or less confirm those facts. It appears to us that dedicated access already exists at the northwest corner of the Silver Dollar property, which is the same as the southwest corner of the Henderson property. When we look at historical photos, it looks like that access has been used for many decades. We've got pictures of it back into the 1980s where that same path has been utilized for accessing their property. We believe that granting this vacation is in the public interest. We've received nearly 500 registered county voters who signed a petition in support of this. We have 130 or 40 tenants on our property. Now, many of them are looking for covered outdoor storage for their boats, their RVs, their heavy equipment. This is the part of the land that we dedicated for that purpose when we bought the property a year ago, the 31st of October. So we're working diligently to improve the property and provide a public service. From our perspective, vacating the section line will have essentially zero impact on the Henderson's access. They've obviously never needed it historically. And John has indicated they have no intention of building this, but they wanted to maintain it for their own personal reasons. And he can speak to that. And I guess the last thing I would mention, it's clearly depicted on this drawing that you've received, but this would be a roadway into a floodplain. And I'm not quite sure. The DOT engineer estimated the cost of this roadway at $200,000 to $300,000 if it were ever built across our property, and that's in today's dollars. So if you don't have any other questions at this time, I'll go ahead and sit back down. Or if you do, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions? All right, thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Next, we have Cale McDowell. Are you for the vacation or against the vacation?
I'm against the vacation. So it's Cale McNabo. I own Long Branch Civil Engineering, Rapid City. I represent the adjoining landowner. That's the Cross Sabers group. And what we're discussing, and what I've been asked to do, is to take a look at the feasibility of constructing the section line. That really has been kind of sort of my involvement. So I've taken a look at a couple of options, and the one you see, the first exhibit here, would show you, does a pen work on this, PJ?
Ted, it didn't, but you might want to try it, Kale.
Pen gonna work on this?
No, I tried, it didn't work.
Okay, well, I'll try to explain it the best I can. If you see the section line, you look at the red would be the proposed road alignment, the yellow would be the 66-foot wide section line highway. What you're looking at is a 20-foot wide gravel surface with 3-to-1 in slopes. That gets you to a catch point that's maintains inside that section line highway. Now, the county minimum ordinance for local streets is, of course, 24-foot gravel surface. That is not constructible without having the grading limits going beyond the 66-foot. The county ordinance also does make a provision for access that doesn't have to meet the 24-foot gravel surface if it serves less than 2 lots. So this is essentially what we're looking at is the area in blue across the area in blue across the Mickelson Trail. The area in red, you can see the creek is underneath it. That's the hydraulic floodway. There's no construction in the hydraulic floodway. No fill can be placed in there. The area in blue across the top of the Mickelson Trail is the fringe, and the fringe is reserved for construction at a foot above the base flood elevation. So the area you see in blue is all constructible.
Kale, now that you're there, there's a right-of-way for the Mickelson Trail. How far is the right-of-way on that trail before you can build in that right-of-way to the close to the Mickelson Trail?
Yeah, if I could go to the next exhibit, scroll down.
I know they have a right-of-way on each side of the Mickelson, if I'm correct, that you can't build in either.
Get down to the next exhibit, should show us a little better.
Thank
so
you.
Again, in red is the section line we're discussing. As we go further to the north, we can see the red where it crosses the Mickelson Trail, where the red and the blue come together, where they cross the Mickelson.
Is the blue the Mickelson or is the red the Mickelson?
No, the blue is the flood plain. The red is the creek, and
okay, thank you.
And the solid line is the Mickelson Trail. I wish this pen worked. I'd draw that on there for your use, but.
Listen, this is the floodway.
Right. So if you're talking about, you see lot 1, the north side of lot 1, there was the discussion about how they've got access. Point it out so everybody can see what I'm talking about. Okay. Oh, I got a laser pointer. Fantastic. Okay. This trail is right here. This red is the hydraulic floodway. The blue is the limits of the floodplain. And again, the blue is all fringe. That's reserved for construction. Red, that's a no-go. So the discussion is this buildable? Yeah, it is buildable with the 20-foot wide gravel surface in accordance with the AASHTO specifications. The AASHTO specifications are kind of the guidebook to how you design roads nationwide. The county ordinance would require bigger horizontal and vertical curves, but it is buildable to the AASHTO spec at 15 miles an hour. That gets us off the road to the Mickelson Trail down into this area, which would be buildable, which is really the area we're talking about. The area here has access. There's just an enormous cliff that lies in this area.
So you're building, basically, Kale, you're building something so off a road that you have to have a 25-foot setback. You're also on a cliff on the east side of it, and you have a creek with a floodway on the other way for this road to access. How many properties could you actually build in that area?
The setback would be off the property line. The Mickelsons, there's not an easement setback off the Mickelsons.
No, but you have a floodway. You have on that whole side when we looked at it, that's cliff. So then you have, you're not going to be able to build anything on the east side of that until you get on top of the hill.
Yeah.
Bottom line is, Gail, when you look at that, it for me, it made more sense to come off that hill and go on top of that area for, if you're going to put that much money in a road to build that property there.
700 feet of road, I mean, that's not a $200,000 job.
And then you're gonna have a setback of 25 feet off the road?
It
And
will
you're,
be a setback issue, yeah.
and then you got a floodway on the east side of you and the west side is the road. That isn't a lot of buildable space to me. It seemed more, if you were gonna put here's my bottom line. If I was going to build and I was gonna build, it's not that you can't build that right there, is that you're putting a road in to that much space, and maybe you want to do that. But it seems more sense if you're going to do it to take it where it is down further north, come down, and more buildable space to me. And if you're going to put your time and energy into something, maybe that's just me. If I was building something, is I'd take that road down and bring it to the top, meaning into the residential flat area, onto the top on the flat area.
You're talking about this area.
Yeah, so the only road you're gonna build that to is just that little area right there, so they can build, what, 1 or 2 houses? Maybe 1 house?
I don't know what the long-term use of the property is. I know I've been asked to take a look at whether the section line would be constructible.
Because remember, it comes back around and that creek comes back into it. If you look at the picture, it comes back into it. So the only buildable space is right here for this road to go, because this is all floodway and this is cliff.
Yep.
So basically, we're talking a road that, how many square feet is that and how much can you build in that area for that road when maybe, and have you looked into, Kale, the easement? So it would be a nice solution where you could build a road on the easement area of the 30 feet that would be higher where there was a road before, instead of taking it through the section line.
Are you talking about this area, Deb? Or are you talking about this area?
We had looked at the area here,
Right there?
to put, because there was a road there before.
Yeah, and the second, one of the other exhibits that you see on there is
Yes.
a cross or profile view that goes down 66 foot down this property line. And it also provides access across the Mickelson onto this property. When you look at this alignment, there's approximately 26 feet of fall from here to there, over that 700 feet.
This one?
If you move up further, it gets shorter, and all of a sudden that's 45 feet of fall in a much shorter distance than that distance. It makes the road steeper.
Kale, I'm looking at lot 2 where you put the road on the,
Yeah, on the north property, right there.
yes.
Yeah, there's a,
And you could get a 30-foot easement there where you could build that 20-foot road or 14-foot road, whatever, 24-foot road. Instead of building in, do you see where I'm going?
yeah,
To cut off someone's property with the section line, to me, didn't make sense. But to put an easement on his section line on the top, so if he did build 1 or 2 lots, that made more sense than cutting off a guy's property right in the middle. So what, in my case, I'm gonna speak for myself, it made more for the solution to take that 30-foot easement, is what I was talking with PJ, if it could be something like a 30-foot easement on the top, because there was a road, because there used to be a zoo over there.
Mhm.
And to make that road come through, and then that would make the access to Mr. Henderson's for a compromise. It'd also be able to vacate the section line and let Mr. Ditweiler be able to expand his property. Did you look into that option?
this is that option right there.
Yes, sir.
It's the same section. It is same section. This is 66 feet. That is the 20-foot gravel surface, 3-to-1 in slopes. It catches at both the highway here, the highway here.
Yep.
For background, I've sent all these plans to Rich Zocker with the DOT as well for his review.
Yes.
He said he was going to route them around. I have not heard anything yet, and as I understand, PJ has not heard back from him either. I think he mentioned that. This would be that profile that I was discussing.
Right.
Again, that would be feasible for the AASHTO, 15 miles an hour. So I got asked simply to provide us an analysis to see if, from the currently available data, if it would be constructible. And that's kind of what I've done. I've gone through and done my best to try to provide a couple of
So this
viable
30,
options.
instead of having a 66 30-foot easement, would it make more feasible to, you could still build it off a 30-foot easement or not, Kale?
No, that would have to be 66 foot on this rendition to be able to catch the end slopes on this. As soon as this loads back up, it'll show.
Okay.
That's a 60-foot easement right there. And the red lines would be the limits of the slope to make this shoulders catch inside the easement limit.
It would have to be 66 feet on the top.
So Deb, that's what I just want to get on the same page. That's what you're talking about on the property line.
For the easement.
Yeah, and you're saying it'd have to be 66, so it seems to me even that kind of defeats what the owner's doing, because wants to put storage, be able to use where he's got stuff now. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
I mean, he's still got open area, but I just wanted to get on the same page.
You're on the same page. I just wondered if you could build a road within that 30-foot easement instead of doing 66 feet. And I don't, in my mind, I just don't get that other side with the floodway and the hillside. I know we want buildable property. Every property should count. Every piece of property should count, but
I think in that floodway, they can still build if they're a foot above the floodway.
on
In the blue
floodplain.
floodplain.
Floodway, you can't build in. The red, you can't build in at
No.
all. The blue, you have to have a foot above elevation, yeah. But you're only, and you gotta remember the creek is right below there, so the only buildable space is that little space right here.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir?
I went to the property on Sunday.
Yes, sir?
So as an appraiser, this is, if I had to do the highest and best use on that, if you gotta have 3-acre minimum, so you wouldn't want to take that whole area, that little island down there. You'd want to plat it because they own that property on the other side to the east. So you'd plat your creekside lots are pretty valuable. Spring Creek in that area is pretty nice. So you just want to meet your minimal lot width, and then you'd get your 3 acres by going to the east. So what I saw, you could build homes in that.
Okay.
Whether you could get to a cement truck there, I don't know.
The bottom line is, in order to build the road here, we need 66 feet, Kale?
Yeah,
Or can you build can you do it with a smaller easement? That's our bottom line.
No, I think
Mine.
you're gonna need the 66 feet. The problem is the slopes, it's not the surface. There's so much terrain there that to catch the slopes coming out, yeah, you're gonna need the 66 feet to do it.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Any questions from the board?
Madam Chair, I just want to point out, the suggestion of building it north of where we have the 2 yellow lines, more closer to Lot 1, what Kale was pointing out is that the slope of the road would be significantly increased. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean,
But-
significantly.
So let's talk about the.
45, it's a 20-foot difference in elevation.
Yes, sir. So let's talk about a section line in the middle of the property that goes straight down into, what are the elevations and what is it? Do you think the section line area is more feasible
Yeah,
than the easement that I would be talking about, I'll talk about personally, on the north lot line?
it's, the section line is flatter than this orientation, although it's not significant difference. I mean, either one of these, I think, is constructible. The one that was way up north is not very constructible. It's just too much elevation fall to get down and across the Mickelson.
The north, this one or the north, the other one on Henderson's?
The north of Lot 1.
Okay.
If I can go back up to that one. When this guy pulls up.
In the narrow section.
Up in here,
Yeah.
it's too short of a run, and 45 feet of fall is too much distance to make up and be able to get down across the Mickelson and take a hard right turn into this. Like,
They go further north to access though.
to access up up into here.
Yeah, and what that does is if you go down where you're talking about, Kale, and then you go across the floodway and the Mickelson Trail, and you go to the east, all that terrain that you're seeing that's clear, that's flat. Then it goes up on top of that other flat area where you see the clearing. That seems more feasible to get in that area. The only thing is the area here. Everything over there is accessible over there. I'm just talking one piece of property here that can you come down the same way and come across, go north and then come south by the blue area to get to this property so he can do all his stuff.
And their problem now is that when they traverse down the Mickelson Trail to access this property,
Yep.
you really can't get off the Mickelson Trail until you get into this area. You can't exit it in here. It's too steep. So the traffic comes down the Mickelson and exits in this area. If you want to traverse around on this property, you're exiting somewhere near where the section line comes out. You can't get off up here. This is just too steep from the edge of the Mickelson down to the creek.
Without being mean, so's all this stuff we're talking about is pretty steep.
Pretty steep too, yeah. But
And
it's constructed.
it's a lot, well, and it's going to be on somebody else's property where we're affecting that steepness instead of his own where he can do it. It's just going to be steep and cost him money on that property as well, instead of just be on one section line and one easement. You see what I'm saying? So he would have the same issue as you're having here, except he's the one being affected and he's the one that wants the access. The steepness and the grade and everything else is his same issue. He can do it, but he wants it here instead of on his own property. Am I correct?
It's going to be a lot easier to do it here than it is here because of that grade. This alignment here on the section line is already we're maxed out at like 12%, which is the max for a gravel road. And that's over 700 feet. This is over 3/4 of that with 40 feet of fall.
But our job is to make sure that you have access. What that costs for you, whether it's on somebody else's property or your own, that's not our issue. Our issue is, do you have access? And it's going to cost you more money to get what you want in your property instead of costing somebody else to put it on their property. Because we're talking, somebody wants access on their property in order to develop. He's not asking this. Somebody else is asking to put this access on his property, steep or money or whatever you're talking. It's the same issue with Mr. Henderson's property. Mr. Henderson is the one that's going to be affected that needs that road. Mr. Henderson would have to build that road, wouldn't he? Either way.
Yeah. So, but he has legal access. It would, in theory, 700 feet of buildable road versus, does he have access through here?
He does.
Yeah, he does have physical access through there, just a lot harder to build it. It'd be a lot harder to build this than it would be to build that.
But think about it, Cale. You're doing that access there. You're not only doing that access on if that was my property, I'd be doing that access to get to this property that goes from north to south, and it also give me access from north to north, and then being able to go to that property. So that access would be more beneficial to me anyway, no matter what those slopes are, because I'd be developing two areas. I'd be developing to the south, and I'd also be developing to the north, going on top of that hill. So
I don't think we'll be able to
either way, if he wants to develop that property across that street over there, he's going to have that access.
Well,
Am I correct?
This connection is not doable. It's too steep to there.
No.
That is the one that I think you were discussing, but this connection I don't see any feasibility in making that connection.
Actually, Cale, they go, I don't know how far north, but there's a gate there, and if I'm right, Ron?
They cross
then
here somewhere.
Yes, but see, you would take one to the north and then one to the south off the same road you'd still have to build. Meaning the road that you're building is going to come down and it's going to go north, and then it's going to need to come south instead of coming across somebody else's property.
You're talking about coming in and then going around the creek and then like that?
Or just coming down and accessing somewhere along there, like we said, that you could get across the Mickelson Trail down there, because you would be building not a whole subdivision, you'd only be building a couple houses that would fit on that lot. Am I correct?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Roscoe?
when I took my bicycle down there on Sunday, so I go across the Henderson where the house is, and right there, their driveway goes across to Mickelson. And I noticed that there's some vehicle tracks there because there's a hay field on the east side. So now if you went down their driveway, you could literally drive down that Mickelson Trail until you got to this point right here.
That's how they access it, yes, sir.
John Craniel is about 5 miles off of the Mystic Road, and he has to drive that Mickelson Trail 5 miles to get to his house. So I'm wondering, could the Hendersons go from Norma's house, drive down the Mickelson Trail if they were to develop this, and then they'd have their slight slope? Is that legally possible?
I think that was the bit of the discussion that was just previously had about what's the definition of it. If you were gonna try to subdivide it and put let's say 3 houses down in there, would they allow, the trails allow that? I mean, they have an agreement to allow them agricultural use off the trail, but I don't know that they have an agreement to allow 2 houses or 3 houses or 4 houses.
Well, that's something I think we need to find out.
Well, PJ said, PJ, are you missing anything for residential? They said they could use it for residential.
Right, but she did not put a number on it. I did invite her to the meeting today to speak, or her supervisor informed her she's not allowed to attend. Yep. Also, just a reminder, when we were talking about easements before on Lot 1, remember that's a third party that's not represented here today. That's Howie's property.
Well, that easement would be on Lot 2.
Yeah, just in case we're overlapping on Lot 1. Okay. What's that? Do you want to interpret it?
And when we talked to Mr. Howie, if I'm correct, he didn't have a problem with that easement.
Okay.
If you remember us talking to him.
I do, yep. And I'm going to get out of this and just go back to a PowerPoint so we can see this.
If I'm correct, the bottom line is to try to get access to his property. Does he have to have a section line in order to get to his property, or can it still be accessed without using a section line or a vacation of a section line? To me, you come in the same issue, the money and the slopes and everything else, whether it be on someone's property or your own. That's my opinion. Okay.
And I know we've had
PJ.
Yeah, I know we had a lot of discussion about the access for the Hendersons, and just bringing back to the state statute, that's not one of the requirements, but I'm glad that the commissions are looking into it.
Say what you said. Explain.
Yep. As far as state statute goes, the commissioners are allowed to vacate or change or relocate if it's better served the purpose for the public interest, and does it still provide access to the public land? And I know we spent a lot of time about whether there is access onto the Henderson's property.
There is.
There will still be, and just respectfully reminded that's not necessarily one of the requirements, but I do appreciate the amount of time that we spent on it to make sure all parties are considered.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, Michelle, do you want to speak? Okay.
Yes, thank you. Michelle Hoffman, State's Attorney's Office. There's been some discussion as to access via the Mickelson Trail. I haven't had an opportunity to review the Game Fish and Park agreement with the Hendersons in detail, but it appears to me that there's access across the Mickelson for purposes of residential. So that's just simply traveling across to get to a home. The other is the landowners, the Hendersons, are allowed motorized access upon the trail. That's where I think we're discussing coming down the trail. Their access upon the trail is limited to right-of-way for the purposes of fence maintenance and ranch activities such as moving livestock and feed and performing routine ranch activities. So I don't know when we're talking about coming down the trail, upon the trail, whether that would allow access for purposes of residential development. I just wanted to point that out. There's a question there.
Okay, thank you. We do have one more speaker. It'd be Quentin Riggins. Good morning, sir.
Ms. Hoffman spoke to one of the chief concerns that we had when we were listening to PJ speak about the conversations he had with the Game Fish and Parks, specifically when he mentioned that they told him that they would allow access across the trail. Whether or not that means they'll allow us to put multiple residences in the area and utilize that area is a different question that I don't think we have an answer to as we sit here. So that is a significant concern that we have. Listening to Cale, I have some significant concerns whether a road can be built on that northern property up to county specifications, given that sharp right turn that would need to be made in order to even access that lower portion of property. And so if we can access through that north part of the property, we've in essence got that small parcel down below that could have 3 or 4 residences on it that's essentially landlocked. And so then we would be having to argue over how we get access through another point to that property to be able to develop it. And we're going to be right back here dealing with it again, I'm afraid, if that's the case. And so where we sit, we've got kind of a unique situation where we're really dealing with 2 different people's property rights. And we've heard a lot about, the fact that this section line goes through the middle of one parcel of property. When that property was acquired, everybody knew there was a section line there. That's just part of what happens when you buy property. You have to take the good with the bad and not just assume that that thing's going to go away. Whereas we also have a competing property interest in the Hendersons, where we just need to make sure that there's some way to get to that piece of property or it potentially loses all of its value.
Well, Mr. Quinton, is there, as our planning director said, there is access to that property? It's going to cost more money in order to access that property through him doing it on his own property instead of going on a section line. Am I correct?
When I reviewed the plans with Cale beforehand, I don't believe you can access that northern route without having and meet county specifications because of the way that it lies and the fact that that turn is going to be so sharp. I'll have to rely on Cale for that, but that's my understanding of the discussions with him, is that if that northern route is used, we won't be able to get up to county specifications.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Ross.
When they said the public's best interest, that's what got me, because you're right. We got property rights involved. We got Henderson's and then we got Dan's. So there again, I'm putting my appraiser hat on. So what I look at, what would the increase of value be on Dan's property if that section line wasn't there? How much per square foot would that 66 feet plus 25-foot setback, what would that be worth? Put a number to it. And then what would the cost to cure be to build this hypothetical road? And you could weigh those two and see which one of the would weigh more, and maybe that would be a way you could gauge the public interest.
And I think it's fair to discuss the fact that we do have to weigh the public interest. There are statutes that relate to compensation when you're dealing with vacation of section lines and providing access to properties. But the overriding concern that I have at the end of the day is that I need to make sure my client still has the right to access his property and that he's still going to be able to use it in some fashion.
Well, originally, Madam Chair, it seemed to me we were just concerned about horses and motorcycles and just some access in general. I didn't realize it was 66 foot.
And that, again, I'd have to rely on Cale. That's what he says is necessary in order to get a roadway built.
Okay. You're a lawyer for Mr. Henderson? Is that who you're speaking for? Okay. Thank you. Any questions for him? Okay. Thank you, sir. So, PJ, read what you had said legally that we could do as commissioners, and then if Mr. Henderson or Mr. Ditweiler agreed to put an easement on his property, he would have to agree with us to vacate the section line and then put an easement on his property. Am I correct?
I don't want to enter into contracts. I would, from my perspective, I would think so, but I would, again, rely on the state's attorney for allowing that. But I can read the state statute. It's just the one statute that's in the staff report. It's South Dakota Codified Law 3136. And I'll just read exactly how it appears in the staff report. So South Dakota Codified Law 3136, which states the criteria for the vacation of a section line and explains the power of county commissioners to vacate a section line. The statute states power of county commissioners and township supervisors to vacate, change, or locate highway on petition, contents of petition. Upon receiving the petition of two or more voters of an organized civil township or of the number of voters equal to or greater than 1% of the ballots cast for the last gubernatorial election in the affected county, the Board of Supervisors of the township or the Board of County Commissioners wherein the highway is located or is proposed to be located may, except as provided in sections 31.312 and 31.344, vacate, change, or locate any highway located or to be used within the township or county if the public interest will be better served by the proposed vacating, changing, or locating in the highway. The petition of the voters shall be set forth beginning, course, and termination of the highway proposed to be located, changed, and vacated together with the names of the owners of the land through which the highway may pass. And this was last updated in 1985.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
One other thing is, this is the property, can we leave that picture up with the grass?
This one?
First,
Sorry.
that's the property we're talking about that, the slopes are supposed to be pretty intense. If you look at the slopes, do we have a picture of the other slopes on 385 looking at Mr. Ditweiler's?
Yeah, let's just take a second to explain what I did. So this is a bird's eye view looking down at A, B, and C. And so different views. On the left is view A, standing on 385, looking onto the property. The middle picture is B, which is standing in the center of the section line, looking towards 385 from the Detweiler property. And C is on the far east side of the Detweiler property, looking towards 385.
So the slope gets, if you look to the third one, the slope gets pretty high over there, and it drops pretty quick. But if you looked at the first picture, and I'm not an engineer, Gail, but it seems like it slopes down a lot more gradual on the north slope than it does anywhere around Ditweiler's. So to me, and then looking at, I know the guy next to him wanted to sell the property back there. There's some flat area back there, and it would be for access. That's a lot. To me, it just doesn't make sense to put a road in the middle of somebody's property for a section line right in the middle of their properties. And a 6-foot right of way on the top of your property is something I haven't seen. I've seen them give 30 or 40-foot easements to get to their properties, but I've yet to see a 66-foot right of way on the top of somebody's property to road to 3 houses. Because most of the time, people will not want to build a 66-foot road no matter what. They will always try to build a 14-foot or a 24-foot road no matter what.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner LaCroix.
First, I want to thank Mr. Rosknecht for taking a bike ride out there looking at the property. Quite frankly, because some of the discussions that were going on today, I did not look at when I was up there. To be quite frankly, I didn't think about the property line, visualing that, or the other part where that one picture is where he just went by with the 2 posts. I just kind of looked where those last pictures were. That's where, yeah, to see what I thought was feasible. And I didn't think a road was feasible at that point in time. The discussion that we've had before on this was just access for ag. And then all of a sudden today we're getting into discussions of development of properties and houses and so forth. And so that kind of changes the whole outlook on how I'm supposed to view this. So quite frankly, I guess I'm still looking for some discussion because I had my mind made up when I came in on some stuff, but I'm kind of open now because it seems like I need to revisit the property and look at some of these options to see, just to have the good visual. As I said before this was discussed, there was no talk about the other access. There was other accesses, but some of these options of the property line and having that property owner be okay with it. I wouldn't want to take no actions on that without him being here and having that approval. But I guess I'm open to what the rest of the commission has to say at this point, but.
Well, when we were out there, he said he didn't mind it. It made more sense. The property owners of number one, lot one, said it made more sense to do it on the section line, or not section line, the easement. At the time, I never thought we were thinking about 66 feet. Like I said, I've never seen somebody have to do a 66-foot easement on their property for a section line.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense because most of the time you won't build a road, even with slopes, giving them a 66-foot easement. Take my word for it, if you want a road, you're going to figure it out. And we've noticed that in many areas in the county, on our roads and our slopes haven't been exactly normal. I understand property rights on the property in the blue, and I still believe on and maybe I'm wrong, Kale, the slopes on that north side seem to come down a lot softer than trying to build something up on the area on lot 1 and 2. That's my opinion, not my engineering expertise. You got a lot of property, Mr. Henderson, out there that's going to need some access. That's my bottom line. And it's not just going to be these 3 areas. So this road is going to be made for these lots, right? Just that blue area right there, that's it. So we're going to give a 66-foot easement for 3 lots, which I have not seen in my lifetime. And then you have a road that could actually, in all the bare areas that we had looked at out there, that would actually make sense to make a road into the property that would access many areas of those areas where you could see the landscape. You could build many housing units. So again, I think the easement idea is a good idea, but I don't believe you need a 66-foot easement. That's my opinion. PJ, to build a road, you're not an engineer. Mr., tell me your name again. You're with planning. Jason, you walked out there with us. You've been working in planning. PJ, you're working in planning. How many roads have we built for 66-foot right-of-ways and made 66, meaning we needed that much right-of-way on each side of a road plus the road since you've been here?
Usually the right-of-ways are smaller than 66, and the paved surface is even smaller than that.
Yes, sir. Because what they do is they don't want to build these roads up to 66 feet. They don't want to build them that wide to get to their properties because it costs them a lot more money. So I think the solution is giving the easement. That's my opinion. If you want your section line gone. So Mr. Henderson has a solution of if he decides he needs access, that he can use that in some way or another to build his road, and take my word for it. If he wants to develop that, he will find a way to do that with that easement. And I think he can accomplish that from what I've seen in other people's properties. That's my opinion. That's all I got to say. Believe it or not. PJ.
Yep, and just discussing with Mr. Detweiler, if he pleases, he'd like to speak again.
Mr. Ditweiler.
PJ, can you bring up that thumb drive file for me?
Yes, sir.
While he's doing that, I'll just point out that I don't doubt the engineering work here. I think it was completely unnecessary because there was never really a question as to whether or not it was feasible to build a road. But a couple of these drawings looks like they're based off of rapid maps. The property lines are off by very significant margins, so they're not actually showing you where the property is, where this easement that's being described is located.
Okay.
You can't use this to find it because it's not even close. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and skip this. I made this drawing up, and I had an error, which Jason was kind enough to point out to me this morning. This dimension on here is actually 608 feet, and it lands on the other side of the approach there.
I can get you to an accurate photo.
Okay.
Rapid Map actually was updated and shows the property lines where they should be.
All right, and I can zoom in and out there.
Yep, so this is where your property line really is.
Very good.
And then also, that's where that property line is.
And this is...
And I know you know how to use Rapid Map, so.
I'm better with Google Earth myself, but... so a couple of things. With the pointer here, you can see the existing ramp that's been used over numerous decades to access this portion of the Henderson property. What's a little harder to see here, and by the way, this blue line, these are the 50-foot offsets that make up the full 100-foot width of the Mixel Trail. When I spoke to Game Fish and Parks a few days ago, Dana, she told me that there is no issue using this ramp, coming down here, getting into this right-of-way and driving through the right-of-way right up to the same Mickelson crossing that the Hendersons have been using right here for decades. So in terms of grade, I know the engineer spoke to the steepness from the end of this ramp and down here. Well, you've got 23 feet roughly of elevation change from the highway to my ground. Sorry, I'll move over there. Down to here, there's about 23 feet from the curb line down to our flats. There is a major culvert crossing underneath the highway right here that dumps out here. And building a roadway in here would impact significantly on the drainage coming underneath the highway and being dumped onto our road. 66 feet doesn't sound like a lot, but when you project it onto a map like this, it goes from this property corner all the way down to about that blue line, actually. And same thing here. And so what that means is, if this was an easement rather than a section line, it would still preclude us from the development we have planned for this area of the property. We had considered and would have been willing to grant a narrower easement on the north property line, even though the Department of Transportation has said they would not provide a drive approach permit here or here. So,
Mr. Henderson, can I ask you why you're in that area? So did you ask them the drive approach on a section line in the middle of your property? Was that an option did you ask them if they could it was feasible to go on the section line in the middle of your property? Sound more like a better place to access?
I got in writing, and so did PJ, response from Rich Zacher.
Sorry.
That they were not inclined to grant an access easement at either the location of the center of the section line or at the north property line because neither one will meet the criteria they need to use for safety considerations.
Thank you.
So, all along I want to help find a solution. That's really where my motivation comes from here. I don't want to have my property value diminished. I want to be able to continue developing the property, and I don't want to take anything away from the Hendersons. And I don't believe, in fact, that vacating the section line takes anything away from them. So in this case here, oops, okay. In this case here, here's the end of the ramp that exists, and we come over here to the edge of the Mickelson Trail, and there's been discussion that there's a lot of elevation change sloping down this direction and then sloping back up here. Well, so what you do is you add fill in here, and you may take some material out here, but you've got hundreds of acres to access to harvest fill to create a ramp so you could cross right here. Or you could bring it all the way up to this property corner, which is actually shown incorrectly here, but it's here. And you could cross right here onto the Henderson properties. And you could do it for a few $1,000s of equipment time using material already on site. So, you know, to me, there are numerous alternate solutions here. Mr. Howie wants to sell this piece of property. And as you can see, there's another access, which I assume the Hendersons probably have been entitled to use, where they come through here, they go down this roadway, and they come over and they cross onto the Nicholson Trail behind the Silver Dollar. This entire piece of property is worth, my realtor suggested maybe $50,000, or a tiny fraction of the cost of building a road across the middle of our property. I want to reiterate, 66 feet is pretty big area, but it's 116 feet legally. So we're excluded from putting any permanent structures in a 116-foot wide area. EJ, can you help me get that file? Because I will show a picture of that and just demonstrate it clearly. There are a couple pictures here that I had copied onto a thumb drive that will help.
Are there more? Because this was the only thing that was on there.
On the thumb drive?
Mm-hmm.
No, that's just one picture.
If you have it, I can just plug it in.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, while he's finding that thumb drive picture, a comment he made just to me almost made this possibility of building a road on that section line a moot point. If DOT is not going to allow an ingress, why are we even talking about it?
That was my position as well. It was one of my first bullet points. Okay, so aerial images. Okay, so how do I scroll to the next one? There's the next one. So this one, this is my own sketch from a Google Earth map. I added the full width, including the 25-foot setbacks, so you could see the actual impact of the section line across that property. It's devastating. And that's why we're requesting that it be vacated. Okay, skip that. This one, I can rotate the view. I don't know where that is. Well, I was going to rotate it for you to make it easier to look at, but you're familiar with this this location here. That's the existing access. Zoomed out, you can see the existing access again here. And if you continue this, maybe there's some fill required to get up over this, but you can come here, or the property corner is actually where you see the end of that fence line, and there's about a 35-foot right-of-way that continues along up to the crossing that's been used historically.
There used to be, here's the thing we're missing, which Howie was very cordial about telling us. His property's built on fill. There was a zoo there, and that road that you're seeing around Howie's property is where the zoo had the road from either the north side or the south side of his property. It actually goes around his property. So at one time, that property wasn't that built up. It was built with fill. So he's actually, his property is up here compared to everybody else's. That's actually fill, and he has some sinkholes going on in there where It seems more feasible, actually, again, to build at the bottom and not in the fill area, the areas that Mr. Ditweiler is saying.
This building that you see here no longer exists. The Hill City Fire Department burned it down for us. This was part of the old zoo, and our lot and Howie's lot were part of a single lot previously, and the owner split it and sold first to Howie, and then we purchased a year ago. The point of this shot is I don't find the opportunity to rotate this for some reason, make it easier on everybody. But this was zoomed out a bit further to show once again, you come down off the road, as they've been doing for decades, come around the corner, drive right up along the Mickelson Trail, turn left, and here's the gate on their property. There's nothing to prevent them from doing that today. There's nothing about this that affects them from being able to do that. And if they wanted to soften the slope from this area here to this area here, it's relatively simple to use their existing material to do that. Buying fill and trucking fill in, like we had to do recently on our property, is quite expensive. So you saw a brand new 124-foot long building when you were on our property. The rock underneath that building was about $10,000 for that little 3,000 square feet. So you can imagine what it would cost to build an elevated roadway across our property, just with that in mind.
Madam Chair. Dan, would you go back and show us that your access off of John's property that we go down the slope where they've been using for decades?
I'm sorry, I'll go right back there, but this is back in the 90s. You can see the same exact access from this very old photo. And did I go past it, Ron?
I think you went by it.
Did. Keep going.
So I've been out there enough that I'm following what you're saying. I'll wait for John to come up and explain if he's got a rebuttal of what you just said. So
Cale? This
makes sense.
Actually, Cale probably, he's speaking for Mr. Henderson. Cale?
Or that's fine. I kind of have to agree with Dan that would be a lot cheaper going that route and legal, in my opinion, than building a road that you don't even know you get legal access off of Highway 385.
Okay, Cale.
Point out a couple of items, and in fact, this exhibit he's got up, I think, proves most of our point. Back to the 66 foot, that's the county's standard for right-of-way widths for local streets. So that's, we always start with this county's minimum right-of-way widths required to plat local or collector streets. That's 66 foot. So we don't ever get, basically, if it's going to be a dedicated right-of-way, it doesn't ever get smaller than a 66-foot right-of-way. This exhibit, I think, shows exactly what we were talking about. If you want to come in this way, and I think the state's attorney did a great job of pointing out that, in their opinion, we're allowed perpendicular access on the Mickelson for residential. I don't know that anybody here is authorized to allow construction of a road that goes down the Mickelson Trail in their right-of-way. The Mickelson, from what I understand, is allowing perpendicular crossing of the road. Look at how much land we got to get across this right-of-way. If that's the Mickelson Trail right-of-way, that's a creek. How do I get a road that comes through here, gets over the Mickelson, perpendicular, and somehow makes the corner before we run into the creek? That's why putting the access over here, where we have much more area, makes sense. This exhibit, I think, proves exactly what I was trying to relate to you earlier and did a poor job of. I can't get a road coming over the top, getting over the 100-foot right-of-way for the Mickelson and make the turn before we get across the creek.
But Cale, his property goes a little bit further to the south. So it wouldn't be just right there. He could go further down a little bit and then put the access. He doesn't have to put it by that creek corner. He can go further down.
They're right there. That's what we just discussed. That's the end of this property is not owned by my client. That line is right there. So my client owns from here to here to be able to somehow get a road across the trail.
Drop an elevation from here to here. Just ballpark? I see the slope right here.
Yeah,
What's that change?
I did not go out and survey that part of it. I know that they don't get off of it now. They have to get off of the Nicholson Trail over here because that's way too steep.
So Kale, you're not gonna build that wide of a spot to go across that creek to get over there and build the road on the other side. You're gonna need just an access across the Mickelson Trail.
Yeah, but it's got to be 20 foot wide. It'd have to be a 20-foot gravel surface that would come over the top, perpendicular to the trail, and then make the turn. And it's making that turning movement is our problem, right there. That's the turning movement that's a problem because the creek is right beside the trail.
Kale, from the creek to the fence line, what's that distance, 60 feet?
Boy, I don't know off the top of my head, to be honest with you. I could probably scale that.
Probably more than that.
I'm sure if we click back to Rapid Map, we could go ahead and.
Probably around
The
70.
bottom line, Kale, is.
Well, when I looked at that dimension earlier today, it looked like about 70 feet.
Sir, hold on.
70.
So the bottom line here is, can he get access to the other side of that property on his own property, Kale?
Could it be done? I mean, is that the question?
Yes.
Just physically, could it be done for whatever? Well, I mean, we put a man on the moon. We could
Kale.
build a bridge.
Well, that's what I'm asking. Can it be done because it'd be on his own property instead of using somebody else's property to get access for him to use his property, to make money off his property, to build something on his property? Does that make sense?
Oh, I understand what you're saying. Is can it be done? And yeah, I mean, we could hammer a tunnel through the rock wall too, but everything's physically capable of being done.
But I'm asking something, Kale. So you come down and he accesses the property down here. He comes across and goes to the top because he can't access because all those trees you see are a wall, basically, a ledge. So the only access he can get is between that 60, 70 feet to that bottom property.
You vacate that section line, his access has got to be happening in here, and that is, I don't think, constructible.
Not feasible?
I don't believe it's constructible for the county ordinance. It's a 100-foot right of way, or 100-foot radius for the county ordinance. I don't know how you get over the top of the trail, through the 100-foot right of way, and hit a 100-foot radius curve and not end up in the creek.
So you've been to Thunderhead Falls and those areas, Kale?
You need exceptions and what?
So it is possible on your own property to do it, it's just gonna cost you a lot more.
You would need exceptions and variances granted to the county board to be able to construct a road that didn't meet the county's criteria.
Kind of like we're doing today.
So clearly, we each have our own interests here, and we're trying to defend them. I'm hoping to always be honest and straightforward. So I'm just going to point out that there's no requirement. What did I do here? One of these days, I guess I went the other direction. Okay, sorry, I'll scroll back.
Anybody got some Dramamine?
Get busy. Where did?
Okay,
Where did
board,
that?
do you have discussion why he's finding his pictures? Do you have any suggestions, any ideas?
Can you help me find
Right,
it?
right now, I'm looking at the cost to build a hypothetical road off of 385 on the section line versus the cost
Yeah,
to
that would
build
be
a
true.
bridge across the Mickelson Trail.
Well, the bottom line is you cannot access 385, so you're not building an easement. We can't give an easement or if he does an easement or we do a section line, he's not going to get access from the DOT. So the bottom line is the only place that he can bottom line put this road is where Mr. Henderson's road is.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner.
you just pointed out why we just need to vote that we're going to either we can't base our decision on vacating that property line on whether or not they're going to build a road there, because they're not going to.
Yes.
Even if he built 4 houses there, it wouldn't justify the expense, even if DOT would allow for a road to be built on that section line. It wouldn't justify the expense. So we're just arguing about something that's not ever going to happen, in my opinion. So I think we need to vote on
Okay, so
whether or not we want to allow Mr. Detweiler to expand his operation into
Section line.
that section line. And really, that's the only thing I think monetarily that makes sense to consider. I'm not arguing with you, Cale, that you could build a road there. I'm just saying that cost-wise, it would never work out. It'd never pan out. Even if the guy could build 3 houses there, unless those houses are going for $1.5 million a piece, I mean, it doesn't pencil out.
I'll just finish the point and then I'll sit down or take questions. So up here, we see the ramp that's been used, and Cale's been discussing the 90-degree turn that would have to happen at this location. Well, there's no reason why a road couldn't extend out a little further and gradually turn and come across here at an angle and eliminate having to make a hard 90 in this area. There are so many options here that are available that aren't being pursued, and it's part of what's concerning. How he's trying to sell this little piece of dirt here, we all know that. You know, he would probably sell the corner right there. I don't know what it's, oh, I see what's happening as I'm hitting the arrow.
Okay,
So,
Mr. Ditwiler, here's the bottom line. I think we've got what you're talking about, and we're gonna go ahead and do our discussion, sir. Thank you for your time, and thank you for the other side.
Could I just say thank you for your time?
Thank you.
It's truly heartfelt. I really appreciate it. And PJ and Jason and the staff in the planning department have just been incredible. I don't imagine that so many issues coming before them require this much effort. And they've been professional and responsive, and I really appreciate you guys.
Thank you. You'd be surprised how many issues we have, sir, they have to deal with it for us, so. Do we have a motion or more discussion?
Madam Chair. So if I read this right, there's a good probability that the South Dakota DOT would not like or prefer access off of highway, they call it Highway 16, I call it 385, via the section line. Is that
Section
the
line
correct
or
statement?
easement?
Correct.
Section line or easement, sir. Either one.
Then it's kind of a no-brainer.
Okay. So do we have a motion or discussion?
I'd make a motion to move for approval of vacation of the section line
We have a motion for approval. Do we have a second?
with 2 conditions.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Second by LaCroy, moved by DeSanto. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Thank you for the discussion today. Item C,
PJ Conover, Director, Planning Department. Item C is just kind of an update. To discuss this with commissioners before about sending out thank you letters to applicants that we have that have good reviews. We haven't done that before. We've done it not for permits, but we've done it for ordinance amendments when someone's come into compliance. But what we created was kind of like a one and done scenario. And it's all based on time and ease and saving taxpayer dollars, and also that the applicant of the permit is a good steward. So any of our permits that are approved either by you or through the Planning Commission that have conditions of approval come up for review in time. If it's only one review, there's no valid complaints, and that they appear to be followed, and they follow all the conditions, we're simply just sending out a thank you letter, letting them know that we appreciate their efforts and for being good stewards of that permit in the county. So, so far, they've all been, the ones that we have sent out have all been in Commissioner Roskinick's district, because that's where most of them come up. But we have about 6 more to send out after yesterday's Planning Commission meeting, and I believe 3 of the 5 districts will be represented, so.
good job, PJ.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. Item 23 is Commissioner DeSanto, change of meeting time, sir?
Yeah, for the special meeting, if we can all agree, I would like to, when we were making these plans, I forgot that I was going to be out of town and returning Monday.
Okay.
I can get back here Monday by 1 o'clock. And so if we could change this to the Stalling Barn Project Award to October 21st, 2019 at 1 p.m. as opposed to 9 a.m. I would appreciate that.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner LaCroy.
could we consider 3?
Can't make it.
Gary can't make it? Okay.
I'm going, I gotta be someplace else by 2:00. So.
Either way, I lose 3 hours, so it doesn't matter. I was going to say, either at 8 in the morning I'll leave, or, yeah, so I'm good with 1.
You sure, Lloyd?
Yep.
Okay. Ron, you okay with 1 o'clock on the 21st?
Got it in my calendar.
You good? I'm good. Holly? Okay, so do we need a motion to that effect, please?
So move.
1 o'clock
Second.
on the 21st for the bid opening, or the approval of the bid. Moved by LaCroy, second by DeSanto. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, motion carries. Okay, committee reports. That'd be you, Commissioner LaCroy.
Jeez. We're out today. We had the Central States Fair Board meeting yesterday.
Who's this?
That went for quite a while. They discussed a little bit about, they did some reviews of Ron Jeffries and talked about some personnel stuff. Nothing, they're in the green and they're waiting for the bids for the stall barn. One other thing I did was, went to the MacArthur Safety Justice Challenge in Houston with a group of Sioux Falls County Commissioners and a group of ours. Part of what that is it was about 7 or 8 classes on reformative justice and to catch up on where we were at. And one of the highlights of that meeting was, let me look at my agenda. One of the cool things they did with this thing is they put all the agendas online now, so you click your own ones and you can do it. And I can't find it because I wasn't prepared. There we go. We had one on question and answer session on racial and ethnic disparity. And we had a round table on engagement and assistance of race relations and so forth. And this was with Eric Brings White was one of our attendees who went with us, and I have to admit, he was the highlight of that session on the last day because Minnehaha County and another person from Minnesota kind of took up quite a bit of the time asking Eric what some of the work that he's doing on Pine Ridge and in our community. The other meeting I attended was the YFS board meeting, a program committee, and one of the things they did is they approved getting on board with the One Heart for 1 year trial. That was one of their highlighted topics. With that, I'm closing. I'm tired. I didn't write down everything, sorry.
Mr. Commissioner DeSanto.
Attended the extension meeting. Their AV system cost them a lot less than they had expected. Therefore, they had some money left over in the budget. There were some ovens at the extension that are used occasionally by 2 different groups. There's some question as to who owns the ovens. However, 2 of the ovens that are in question are not operating properly. And therefore, no matter what, because they're not operating properly and pose a danger, they need to be replaced anyhow. So we're going to use the money that we save from the AV system to look at replacing these ovens. Part of a maintenance issue that I'm going to have to talk to Mike Cool about is there's a crack in the wall, a pretty significant crack in the wall that runs the length of the building from east to west. And it's big enough to put your thumb through. And so that needs to be addressed because it's obviously letting in cool air and everything else. So that's something else that we're going to look at. And then they're even after the ovens are replaced, there's still going to be some money left over. And so we're looking at replacing some of the older tables that are outdated and out of use and not working so well. And also their mailbox that leaks, and when it rains, all of their mail gets wet. So we're going to get rid of that and get a new one out there. Membership for extension for 4-H was a little bit down this year, but we feel that it's going to increase and bounce back up again next year. And again, 4-H is a great program, and has been helping kids find something better to do with their time than many other alternatives for a long, long time. So hopefully we'll continue to support that. Library board meeting yesterday, same thing, a review of the director. Turned out the board passed her with flying colors. She's doing a great job. There's a new website for the library that they developed to increase the speed and ease of use for that. And that's about that. That's about it for the library board. And I did also dropped in on the fair board meeting and politely asked Gary to leave. Because I was there first. No, anyway, just to catch up on what was going on down at the fairgrounds. I wanted to stop by. I was in the area, and I've always enjoyed their meetings, and I wanted to stop in. And Gary was kind enough to defer and let me hang out and experience that again. So anyway, anytime you aren't going to make it, Gary, let me know, because I'd like to be there. So that's it for my comments.
Thank you.
Well, it's been 2 weeks ago, so I forgot what the meeting was. We went to the building committee.
Yep.
We just basically talked about the progress of the CARE campus, which is complete, and the jail expansion, which is on schedule. And then we talked about the Stalling barn getting delayed because of advertising. So the next day I took a copy of the Hill City Prevailer, highlighted that it did make it in the paper. So I think we're back on schedule. And that's all I got to say.
Gary?
Well, I won't repeat things that have been talked about, but I did go to the Western Junior Livestock Show this weekend, and there's youth from about 6 states that are represented at that livestock show. And even though the weather wasn't too good to start with, they still had a good attendance. Saturday afternoon, they also recognized Lindell Peterson for going into the Hall of Fame, the South Dakota Hall of Fame, and the fact that he has spent a lifetime working towards youth and youth projects.
Thank you. Done?
Done.
2 things I went to were the users board, the Emergency Service Communication Users Board, and they had many discussions on how we're paying employees and stuff, and that they are working through that with the auditor's office, because a lot of their surcharges aren't paid. They're usually paid like 2 months behind. That they were talking about South Dakota School Mines getting some, instead of having security, maybe having law enforcement on South Dakota School Mines. So that's something being discussed. I don't know if that'll happen. We also talked there about, there were 16 tower sites in Pennington County, and Black Hills Power gave Pennington County one of their towers. So we actually have 3 of our own now, which is nice. Let's see, emergency management was nice to visit with many of the people there. The Black Hills Powwow was going to have a booth this year from emergency management, which I thought was pretty cool. They talked about the declared disasters. There was 2 areas we applied for. If you remember, 164th, and I forgot the other one. I know Rapid Cities was West Nike and maybe the sinkhole. So Dustin's been staying on top of those and making sure those are going through for trying to get some money back for us. Homeland Security grants, they have changed the rules. You have to at least take 2 hours of cyber attack class to get that grant now. So that's something different than hasn't been done before. It was nice to see the city at both of these. City Councilman Laura Armstrong and Chad Lewis, commissioners, so our city council people. So it was nice to just be city county on some emergency services areas that I thought were pretty important to us. I also went to the powwow and saw the grand entry, and again, very beautiful. And again, and again, the announcers. I was with my friend Jermaine, and we just cracked up most of the time. They're always making jokes on different things, but it was pretty exciting because they had the drum players this year. They had a football. They had a game of football. It was fake football kind of, but they wanted to have each drum group get out there and act like they had a play in football, and then they had to do some victory dance. And it was amazing to watch some of the creativity, and it just cracked you up how some of them would just sit up and then just drop, or some would, do some of the dances and then everybody would drop, or just the creativity, because this was just something new. Everybody could give money to do this for the winner. I think what they got was like $246 for just going out there playing football and doing this creativity kind of like drama thing that they had there for the drum people. So again, the music was pretty amazing. The humor and the beauty of all that. I did videotape some of it for my friend. I'm going down to Texas at the end of this month. We're going to go see a powwow down there, plus see a concert and see some NASCAR stuff down there. So it'll be pretty exciting. But that's all I got.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner, the follow-up you're the follow-up guy on this. He remembers.
That's what happens when you start with me first. You know I'm going to forget something.
We're going to have to start with me next time.
But Mr. DeSanto mentioned that Taylor Robertson has been nominated for the Pickup Man. I think it's the nation. They were going to Vegas December 5th, and the nominations will go up. But Western South Dakota, we've got five cowboys that are getting that are running for some achievements for South Dakota. Maybe you can word it better than I did. But the best way to explain that Pickup Man is what somebody said in the fair board meeting was that this was something that the regular cowboys that are doing the Bronx and stuff, it's who they idolize and say who does a good job. And so this means more to the person. I mean, to get nominated by your own people is basically what it is. And so I believe the banquet's in December 5th, I believe, in Las Vegas. And yeah, December 4th. And maybe we can get some more information from Ron, more detailed. I didn't take the notes, but I think as he said, it's a pretty big deal for us.
Awesome.
Bottom line is Western South Dakota has some of the best cowboys in the nation.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what it comes down to.
Pretty awesome.
If you'd like, I could go through my agenda that I had. I found mine.
Our chair has to abstain from the next item, so I'm looking for a motion for approval of vouchers for $3,053,000, $180.97.
I'll make that motion.
Got a motion, is there a second?
Second.
And a second. In favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried, 4 ayes and 1 abstention.
Number 26 is public. 2 public guys out there.
John?
Jay?
Jay?
Jay. We had 3 J's today. Now we end up with 2 J's. Okay.
I appreciate you guys' diligence for sticking around.
27's executive session, SDCL 1-25-2-1, and contracting pending litigation, SDCL 1-25-2, parentheses 3. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Motion to come out of executive session.
So moved.
Moved by DeSanto,
Second.
second by LaCroy. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. We have a motion.
I do. I make a motion to place Holly Hennies at grade 21, step 12 for a biweekly rate of $2,691.20 effective November 17, 2019.
Been a
Second.
motion and a second by DeSanto. Question, Holly? Your face is funny.
I thought it was a 13, ma'am. I thought I'm at 11 now. I thought it was 2 steps. Unless you guys didn't give me a performance step.
Give you one step.
We gave you one step.
I think it's a 2113. But we can double check that.
He took the paperwork.
Where'd John go? This is its paperwork.
Yeah, this is his paperwork. I'm reading directly from it, grade 21, step 12.
Yep, that'd be your one step, Holly.
Right there, he changed the motion.
Okay, we'll make sure it's all right.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Motion to adjourn, please.
So move.
Second.
Moved by Drew, second by DeSanto. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries.